With that, I will call our meeting to order. We are at 6:32. I believe we have everybody in attendance this evening. And I am looking for an approval of tonight's agenda, looking for a mover to approve.
I'll move that, Alicia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I have a seconder, Trustee Hatfield. Any discussion on the agenda? Anyone opposed to approving that agenda this evening? Love to see it. Looking for a mover to convene into private session. Thank you very much. Seconded by Trustee Sipcar. Appreciate it. So we will, for anyone watching, you'll see kind of a blank screen as we go into our private session. Trustees, you will click on the other meeting, and we'll see you over there. And then in this, we'll come back to our public session again at 7 p.m. on the live stream. Thanks so much, everyone.
So thank you for joining us. As Chair Higginson mentioned, we've already opened our public meeting. We've met in private session. We've risen from that and reconvening, and we will start the call to order as soon as we acknowledge the land. We acknowledge that we're on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Huron-Wendat peoples. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Our Education Committee, I'd like to call it to order, and I'd like to note that in attendance we have all trustees this evening. Trustee Olmsted is with us, but she has an intermittent meeting that she needs to attend to. So I will be chairing. I'm looking for the approval of the agenda, item C. I see Trustee Hatfield has moved that. Anyone in support? And Trustee Higginson for support. Not everyone has their camera on, so if you could put it in the chat line, I would appreciate that and I'll acknowledge it. For those who are watching, we have a separate chat and notations for any kind of question, etc., to be asked is noted there. So with the approval of the agenda on fully supported, do I hear any opposition to the approval of the agenda? If you have any concerns, any amendments, additions, now's the time. Oh, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. There is an addition to the agenda as printed. It was noted earlier in consultation with Superintendent Howitt. Item G3, please add that. I'm going to ask the mover and seconder just to say, is it okay with that amendment? G3 is a 3-minute video. We're going to have ongoing updates on the virtual school. This evening's presentation is student engagement outside of the classroom. If I
I'm
hear
happy
no
with that amendment.
opposition, okay, if I hear no opposition, thank you very much. So that agenda amended with G3 is what's on the table. Any opposition? I don't see any and I don't hear any, so thank you very much. That's adopted. Item D is declaration of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations for this committee? Give you a moment to unmute if you need to. Nope. Okay. Thank you. I'm hearing none, so I'm going to go on to item E. Item E is the approval of the minutes. You have before us the Education Committee meetings from February 2nd, and I have a mover of Trustee Sipcar and support by Trustee Higgison. Are there any adjustments, corrections, anything you'd like to do with the minutes? Anyone? I'm not hearing any corrections or anything, so any opposition to the adoption of the minutes? I think we're good to go, and I'll say that that's adopted. Thank you very much. Item F is business arising from the minutes. Does anyone have any business arising from these minutes? I'm not hearing any. Okay. So we are on to presentations, and I will need confirmation that Superintendent Howitt is with us. Otherwise, we will change the order of the presentations. Superintendent Clara Howitt, are you there?
I am.
Yay! Okay. So we're on to G1, and we have a presentation on the arts. We have a PowerPoint presentation that we've been sent ahead of time, and that is being shared on the screen now. And please go ahead, Superintendent Howitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to be here this evening along with teacher consultant Bernadette Berthelot and Karen McClellan from Arts Can Teach to provide the Board of Trustees with an update on the arts. And although the pandemic has changed the arts experience in our school, the arts remain a priority for students throughout the Greater Essex County District School Board. Beyond cultivating creativity, students exposed and involved in the arts demonstrate increased confidence in what they do, improved communication skills, and enhanced learning and critical thinking skills. Tonight, we celebrate the support of the Greater Essex in maintaining the arts for all students, even through a pandemic. In the next slide, you'll see that engaging with our community partners remains a very important priority for the district. And on the screen, you'll see that there are various organizations that we engaged in a variety of ways this year. These partnerships in the community have allowed the arts to be sustained in an exceptionally high level. And I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Berthelot to share the next few slides.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you. Let's start with our partnership with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra. This year, a total of 70 licenses were purchased for K-12 concerts. The K-3 programming involved numeracy, the 4-6 involved literacy, and the 7-12 was a replication of their live streaming regular season concert. In addition to these concerts, we had 2 professional development workshops after school that supported the non-qualified music teacher in bringing the symphony into their classroom. And this was presented by assistant conductor Daniel Wiley. And the idea was to really help create a comfortable space for those teachers to come in. In addition to all of this, in the 7-12 series, Maestro Robert Franz and Daniel Wiley visited 23 classrooms to virtually discuss the concerts and guide the listening of the students. In addition to these concerts, a series of 4 videos was also done for the secondary system with relevance regarding historical and geographical events that have occurred over time. These videos were introduced by Maestro Franz and narrated throughout the video about the composer, the composition, and how they were relevant to these events. Also, 38 licenses from the Concerts for Kids series were purchased for our Gains and Steps classrooms to support their new musical involvement with us. On to our next slide, we showcase our partnership with the Art Gallery of Windsor. They have virtually visited several classrooms of the Greater Essex County District School Board and conducted virtual tours of the gallery, as well as provided artistic, authentic virtual experiences for our students. Classroom teachers were able to sign up for a free 2-lesson workshop with their classrooms provided by an artist in the gallery. The next slide showcases visit number 1. This theme is titled Exploring the Art Gallery of Windsor's Collection. Guided by the artist, students will visit the Art Gallery of Windsor website and use the collection of work portals to review artworks. Students and the artist together select images discussing fundamentals of design and the things that allow students to have a better understanding of what visual art is. Students are then guided to using the no feedback and continuous line techniques for making drawings, much like the ones that you see on the screen here. And at the end of this session, they engage in critiquing and reviewing each other's works. In the next slide, which depicts visit number 2, this one is called Exploring Abstract Art at the Art Gallery of Windsor and Making Abstract Images with Photography. There's 2 photographs up there that were student made from this visit. This workshop begins with reviewing the elements of art and principles of design, and then explores a section of works from the Art Gallery of Windsor's collection that involves abstract art. Students are given prompts to use to find things around them, and then they experiment with and explore the process of abstraction and image making. And again, at the end of this session, they review each other's works afterwards. So far, the Art Gallery of Windsor has supported more than 20 classrooms in both the elementary and secondary levels. Additionally, they have created an education portal that will be available to teachers in mid-April, as well as aligning that new portal with our newly created elementary art kits that you'll hear about later on in the presentation. Dr. Howitt?
I'm super excited to share that in October of 2020, the equipment that you see on the screen began to arrive in each and every one of our Gains and Steps classrooms throughout the district. And these musical tools help promote math skills, literacy skills, life skills, as well as achieve goals set by the special education team for students using this art form. All Gains and Steps classrooms in the district have these tools. On the screen, you'll see the students engaged in the learning. In addition to the equipment that these classes received, professional development was provided in a 6-part series with a music therapist to provide assistance to the Gains and Step teachers in navigating their way around the equipment. Plans, I'm really excited about this too, are provided in terms of a visual arts Gains and Step classroom resources. Ongoing professional development will also happen in that area with a music therapist for the ongoing PD, as well as an art therapist. And this will be used in order to ensure that we're heightening social skills and life skills for our students. In the next slide, you'll have the chance to see a short video of the students engaged in the learning.
Today, the Gain students are using the desktop handbells that were given to us. Every year I do have the Gain students. This year's a little bit different because I'm teaching them an array of subjects because I'm cohorted with certain classes. But I was fortunate enough to be cohorted with the Gain so they can still have a music specialist for their programming. Music is a good opportunity to work on their social, emotional, and physical development. It allows me to work collaboratively with the classroom teacher when we're setting IEP goals for things like tracking and color recognition, patterning, also just working on their gross motor and their fine motor skills. We have a very equipped music room here, but what is lacking is instruments that are physically, developmentally appropriate for Gain students. And so getting these instruments was like Christmas times 1,000 for them, you know, that they finally have things that they feel are accessible to them, whereas an instrument like a trumpet or a ukulele just isn't.
What we did end up getting was xylophones, some bells, we have some shakers, and we have drums. And our students have really grown and enjoy using these instruments in our music program. In particular, it allows them to have a voice in the types of music that we drum to and that we play. It also gives the students some ownership over the instruments and the idea of responsibility. Students are responsible for setting up their own xylophones, getting their own drums out, and making sure all of their equipment is set up prior to us starting our class. The students really cheer each other on after each person plays. There's a round of applause. We also incorporate a daily DPA dancing. Students will choose the songs that they would like to dance to. There's also an element of students learning how to take turns and waiting patiently while the other person is either choosing for their song or playing their song. So incorporating music into our program is absolutely essential. The students thrive on it, the students love it, and I look forward to continuing learning more about how I can do more things in my classroom with them.
So I'll continue on with the string project, which is a very exciting new project in the district. In September 2021, Bagley and Marlborough each received 20 violins for grade 3s to begin a 4-hour per week intense study of the violin, meeting 2 times per week after school. Marlborough has been involved in this project since October with an original attendance of 18 grade 3s that is now down to 14. Bagley's program started consistently about 4 to 5 weeks, but it was sort of stalled due to the long closure because of the COVID outbreak that they had. Currently, Bagley has 14 students that attend the after-school program. This is an El Sistema modeled project, and it is cyclical. Each year for the next 6 years, 20 grade 3 students will begin the study of the violin, while the other students continue to study as they move through grades until they graduate from grade 8. This next slide shows Bagley in their after-school program. Each year for after this grade 3 group finishes grade 3, a new group of grade 3s will start, and this current group will continue on in grade 4. There's a small video that should be on the next slide that showcases what is happening in the string project.
Each and every ant, digging in the dirt, underneath the ground.
It's my first time working in a school setting like this. I've had about 20 years of experience teaching young children with my own string programs. But something like this is just so rewarding because it's their first time playing music. It's nice that they're all together. There's something very special about creating that community of musical practice where they have collective goals. They're picking everything up so quickly. They understand what's correct, what's incorrect. They know what the positions are supposed to be. So they're doing wonderfully.
In an area where many of our families are in the low-income category, highest in the country, having an opportunity for students to be able to have a music lesson, like violin, any kind of music lesson, but particularly having the opportunity as a group to get together, to learn a musical instrument and have that pride. It's something that would not necessarily be afforded by many of our families.
I've always wanted to start a program like this in the school system for children that could not maybe have been exposed to string instruments before.
Because I just wanted to learn it, and then when I grew up, I could be like teachers and then teach my kids violins. It makes me feel proud of myself and kind of happy. And I'm happy that I get to play the violin.
This is the first program of its kind in Canada where we have school-aged children in an after-school program with university students. So it's like giving our students hands-on teacher training, plus we're giving our young students the ability to play a string instrument.
I really like music. It makes me happy when we all play together.
All my family used to play the violin. And it's just something I like to do.
I think the arts are extremely important. The academics are important too, but we need something to inspire the kids to come in. I would love to see them walk away with self-worth and an understanding that they are capable of anything if they put their mind to it.
Other students should join because this is really fun and a really nice opportunity because only 2 schools are doing this.
Our community partnerships in implementing this string project now include the University of Windsor, the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, and the National String Consortium, which is an American organization. The University of Windsor has confirmed the implementation of the string project as part of the current service learning program that is required of their teacher candidates. This will allow teacher candidates who come from a music background to participate and volunteer teach and observe for their own future careers in teaching as part of their Faculty of Education requirements. Our future connection to the National String Consortium will make the Greater Essex County District School Board the first in Canada to be a member. This consortium partnership will offer free student workshops, opportunities for grant funding, and the connection to other programs across the United States. Additionally, the Windsor Symphony Orchestra is encouraged by these very young musicians and plans to bring them to a Junior Strings Youth Orchestra rehearsal, have a workshop with Maestro Robert Franz, as well as waive their fees in participating in the Junior Strings Youth Orchestra program as they advance through this school program. Our next slide will focus on our arts and design courses. In October 2020, we were pleased to bring together a diverse group of stakeholders to explore how we can build a technology pathway in the areas of arts and design. This meeting included a number of arts educators and representatives from the IT department, media service department, and senior administration. We were very grateful for the attendance of a number of post-secondary representatives, as well as various industry partners such as printing and design, music and internet content production, and automotive design as well. The goal was to improve our understanding of industry trends and needs and develop a plan to ensure that both the software and hardware being used in our arts and design classrooms were meeting industry standards. We are pleased to share that this meeting led to the purchase of Adobe Cloud Pro software and the review of existing hardware in our arts and design classrooms. Dr. Howitt?
The Learning Arts Center, the Leamington Arts Center has offered opportunities to display student work. And on the screen, you will see the pressure drop shop contest. The concept of this photo contest was quite simple. The theme of the contest was COVID, and the photos had to convey what the pandemic meant to the students and how it made them feel. And the work was absolutely outstanding. I had a chance to see it myself. In the next slide, you'll see that photos from the students across the Greater Essex were submitted and resulted in students moving forward in the amateur photo contest. And presently, right now, the Leamington Arts Center is presenting a jury show of student work, and it is quite phenomenal and will be available online because the center is now closed. In this slide is really exciting. Coming for September, the elementary art kits are going to be featured in each and every one of our elementary schools. The fundamental idea of the kits is to assist the generalist classroom teacher in designing authentic, artistic experience for all students while delving into the creative and critical analysis process.
The new Greater Essex County District School Board art kits are meant to be more than just a kit. They're not a bin that could, sit at the side of the room. They're not just consumable goods that are materials for students to create with. It's not about that. It's about so many more layers. What ultimately we want to do is open the doors of creativity for students and for educators. So in order to do that, the art kits involve many layers. First of which is spending time with teachers prior to getting a kit that helps them to dig into the curriculum and understand it, challenge their beliefs, stretch their ideas and understanding, and come up with their own creative concepts so that they then can assess their own work, because I think that's one of the biggest things that as educators we struggle with. What does it look like to assess and evaluate visual arts?
I like for art, about the arts, that I can show others something I've imagined or something that I've dreamed in a way that's visual, not necessarily on paper, but on any sort of material that I can get others to understand. And it's fun to strive to figure out how I can really take that image in my brain and put it in a way that others will understand immediately. So I like embroidering a lot, and I liked that this time for art class, we were allowed to include that in art. It wasn't just paper, draw water droplets, do this on paper, that's it, that's all. I liked the creativity. It gave a lot of options.
In my education, it's really important to me that I get this other way to express myself other than, words. With art, you can use different elements to express meaning and emotion, and I think that's really special to me to be able to do that.
Art for me is kind of like a representation of something that you can't say with words, but something you can, instead of expressing it verbally, you can express it like something with an image to show people oh, this is a better representation of how I'm feeling. Put them in your shoes and show them from your perspective of what you're thinking about, your emotions, the kind of things that you're putting all together, so maybe they can connect your puzzle piece and think, oh yeah, that's a brilliant idea, or oh, I see where they're coming from.
One of the most exciting projects currently underway in the Greater Essex County District School Board is called Oral Language, Drama, and Movement in the Kindergarten Classroom. This project is based on a 7-year study out of San Diego through the University of California at Irvine, and with permission of the author, we have replicated this project and used drama and movement artists in kindergarten. Their project also continued to use them in grade 1 and 2, which Karen McClellan will talk more about as the Arts Can Teach coordinator. 2 of our very heavily populated English language learning schools, Bagley and Queen Elizabeth, use Arts Can Teach artists who work with kindergarten classroom teachers to facilitate the use of drama and movement for their students. Karen's going to discuss this more. On the next slide, you'll see a small presentation by Matt Romaine and the types of ways in which he is encouraging our youngest of learners to start using their English learning.
Hello, I'm Matthew Romaine, one of the artists working in the Arts Can Teach program. Next week, I'm going to be working with a kindergarten teacher teaching English to students who are from other countries and other languages spoken in the home. When I met with the teacher and the speech pathologist, and with Karen, we talked about the curriculum that we would be addressing. And I was wondering at first if we were just going to be parroting, having the kids speak and repeat like a parrot does. And if that be the case, I have the fellow right here. Hello, 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 hello. Can you say that? No, oh, you can't. But we're going to be doing more than just parroting. We're going to be looking at the vocabulary of self-awareness in specifically emotions: happy, sad, angry, and scared. This fellow here is for the happy one. It's my friend Liam, and you can see that Liam is a very happy-go-lucky sort of fellow. Liam, yeah? Are you going to ask them what makes them happy? You bet I am. I want to find out what they can tell me. That's right. And the teacher as well. Yeah, the teacher's going to be helping lead this whole thing. That's right. I'm not happy, I'm sad. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. We've got a grumpy old bear here. What's your name? Barry. It's Barry. That's right, I'm Barry. Yeah. Are you scary, Barry? You tell me. All right. So there will be plenty of parroting going on, but some other things as well. And there's quite a bit there. It looks like it should be a very rewarding and I think very effective set of lessons. I'll let you know. Wish me luck. Bye for now.
Windsor Endowment for the Arts has partnered with Arts Can Teach and the Greater Essex Board to launch a 5-year Changing the Odds Pathway to Literacy for Kids campaign. This 5-year partnership is raising community awareness and funding to help research and grow this important English language learner initiative in our downtown West Windsor and Leamington schools. In the next slide, you'll see that we're beginning in kindergarten and expanding to grades 1 and 2 in the big picture. Local anti-poverty organizations such as the United Way and Prosper Us tell us that achieving grade 3 reading proficiency is a key marker for a child's future success in school and in life. In the next slide, this initiative was inspired by the 7-year research project that Dr. Berthelot referred to earlier out of the University of California that demonstrated significant gains in oral language learning in kindergarten to grade 2 classes receiving artist visits in drama and movement. We're replicating the research component here with student vocabulary testing and focus group discussions with participating teachers. Next slide. Our core Arts Can Teach program this year, bringing the arts to learning in grades 1 through 8 in non-arts subjects. Next slide. This year, we've been able to successfully bring arts-infused learning and artist-teacher partnership that's been active in this board since 1999, bringing it to more than 80 classes using Teams video with students, whether they're at home or at school. Next. Artists visit classes from their home art studios in real time, inviting students into the life and work of an artist. Here, April Morris is set up for her communities lesson with Prince Edward class. Next. These empathy classes took place during January's lockdown. Visual artist Ainsley Winter led the class in a drawing lesson to create a black and white figure on top, and then students imagined the figure's inner emotional state using color on the bottom. Our teacher PD workshops are online too. Here, puppeteer Matthew led kindergarten teachers through a step-by-step process of creating their own expressive rod puppet. Next. For in-school learning, artists are beaming in using Teams and are projected on a large screen. Artists can circulate and interact with students on a second device, such as an iPad or a smartphone, and the engagement level is high. Arts Can Teach is so grateful for the creativity, commitment, and resilience of our teacher partners, the board, and our artists here in the Greater Essex School community in this challenging year. Thank you.
The next two slides showcase the professional development that has been offered to our teachers at a time when teachers are tasked with teaching the arts in their classrooms, whether they're specialists in this or not. It is a powerful tool to help in the classroom. You can see the variety of workshops that are supporting what we are asking teachers to do, and they are doing it successfully. Next slide. And this last slide really promotes what I hope will happen in 2021 and 2022, whatever our new normal looks like, and how we will continue to celebrate the use of the arts and allow teachers to gain both confidence and understand how powerful they really are as a learning tool. And finally, thank you for listening. Are there any questions?
Well, that was a very, very powerful presentation. Are there any questions? I see Trustee Higgison has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our presenters. So this is always one of my favorite presentations that we have in this committee is about the arts, because I think, and Superintendent Howie, you kind of nailed it at the beginning about just how resilient kids become in the discovery of that. And we saw that in one of the videos with the students in the violins with El Sistema, which is an incredible program. I'm so impressed by that program. My question is, for Karen, through Arts Can Teach, there was the the kind of grant and the focus of the grant is literacy. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the kind of social emotional learning pieces that we see that are kind of wrapped in some of the presentations that students are getting to interact with, and how and whether you can answer this or not, just how that's kind of impacting, whether it's with the artists or with students or both, the kind of mental health of their ability to connect with each other, or their ability to kind of express some of their anxiety or some of their some of the mental health issues they may be going through, whether there's been a change in any of those.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you. Matthew Romaine, puppeteer, will be the first to tell you that puppets are a wonderful means of bringing children, bringing adults, bringing everyone out of themselves. You can communicate with a puppet with such freedom and such joy. And for the artists, and you're right, it is rewarding for the artists as well, to be able to connect with students and teachers and interact with them in expressive ways. And when we first met with Bernadette and the other consultants to help create the literacy program in the kindergarten school classes for in specific, they really wanted to focus in on the vocabulary around feelings, to really give all learners the opportunity to be able to express themselves with confidence and feel safe. And as you saw in the slides with the empathy lesson as well, there are opportunities for students to express themselves visually, and with an artist in the room or on the screen, working in partnership with a teacher, it really creates a safe emotional space for all concerned. Thank you for asking.
Just had one follow-up from there, if I could, Trustee Burgess. I'm wondering if I saw those goals for 21-22, and I'm so grateful for all of them. I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to involve, now that we've got the ability to kind of do some of these things and shift to online, if there's an ability to involve sort of get pick and parent involvement, because I'm thinking of those, sometimes it's hard to talk to your parents about your feelings, but if you could incorporate some of the things that they're learning in their classrooms or through Arts Can Teach, I'm wondering if there's a way that we can involve kind of parent groups in some of the kind of ways that we explore the kind of in-depth things that they're learning in these classes or in these workshops.
That's a beautiful suggestion, and I really appreciate that Bernadette is here to hear that as well, because as the program has been assembled and as it's been moving through, we've been working in consultation with these wonderful, speech pathologists have been so helpful. The teachers have been very helpful with their feedback, and the consultants as well. So to find ways to build in a connection to parents is a wonderful addition.
Thank you for your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is a great question, and thank you for that answer. Teachers are partners in this. It's a professional development program as much as anything, right? And I think our parents are really, really, really engaged in their kids' learning and understand that emotional language that they have to develop. So that would be a great suggestion. So I have a comment from Trustee Cook and a question from Trustee Halberstadt. Trustee Cook.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I love this program. It's awesome. What it does for the kids, it builds character, confidence, self-esteem, and the communication with the puppets. It does wonders for children. I mean, there's no judgment. Right. It's a safe place for them to open up, and they feel that and they know that. The opportunities to students who outside of school might not even, probably wouldn't have this opportunity, and it opens their mind to possibilities in their life. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
Nicely said. Trustee Halberstadt, you have a question.
Yeah, I have to echo the comments of my previous speakers. Very uplifting to watch this. My one question though is with regard to the actual instruments, the violins, say at Begley. How does that work? They're the board's property, and when the kids show up, they use the they use the violins and then they put them back in the box? Is that the way it works?
So we created a contract for the students of grade 3 that wanted to participate in the spring project. And together with their parents, they've been assigned a violin for this school year. They take the instrument home. They are meeting 2 times a week after school for 2 hours, and they practice at home. And they take the violin with them. They will return the violin to the school board in June so that I can maintain, sanitize, and clean it for next year's groups. We can't really give the same instrument to the students because they're designed for the size of the student. So as these current grade 3s move into grade 4, some of them next year will receive a different size violin that's catered to their own growth. And the new group of grade 3s will reuse the ones that we already have in the system. But the students keep them, they don't share them at all.
Okay. Supplementary, how many people or teachers do we have in the arts department across the system?
Well, we don't have a music specialist at every elementary school. We have the majority of our elementary schools do have a music specialist in them. We have very few elementary art specialists or dance or drama at that level. In the secondary system, all of the secondary schools have specialists in each of the 4 disciplines. In each of the 4 disciplines in high school. I'm just trying to think of how many there are, but the elementary system is not as lucky to have specialists in each of the arts disciplines in it. Dr. Howard?
Yes. And as Dr. Berthelot said, almost all of our elementary schools have a music specialist. That's the reason for the development of the visual arts kits, is to support teachers in providing a strong art program in our elementary schools. And it's like a magnet for our elementary teachers and wanting to learn. And we're providing the resources in the PD, and they're thirsty for it, and we're glad to provide it because it's great for kids.
That promotes the growth, right?
Yes.
Thank
you. I'll remind everyone that our theme this year is diversity, wellness, resiliency, and learning in action. And arts are a very integral part of that. And I think that especially with Arts Can Teach, it's about involving a regular classroom teacher, not necessarily specialists in arts, and to use arts in every subject area across the curriculum. So that's the other way of looking at it, is to make sure that arts are integral to the whole curriculum. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was wonderful. And I'll look forward to that missing video.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm sure a lot of work went into it, and I'm eager to see it. So thank you very much. Any other questions? I don't hear any. I think we covered it all. Thank you very much again for that great presentation. I appreciate that. You'll note that we're now on item G2, which is the mental health update, and that's going to be given to us, shared with us by Superintendent Sharon Pike. Superintendent Pike?
Well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'm really excited to be part of the board meeting tonight to share with you the mental health initiatives within our board. Just to frame it, it does fit into our strategic plan. For confident learners, it's about practice and promoting positive and healthy behaviors. For underengaged communities, it's about responding to the needs of our learners and to partner to enhance outcomes. And thirdly, the ethical stewardship is about effective and responsible and sustainable use of our resources. So for tonight's presentation, we have Charisse Pauley. She has a dual role in our board. She is our mental health lead, as well as the supervisor of social work and attendance counseling. She's got decades experience in providing mental health services for students and youth, and certainly leading teams. So this presentation tonight is on student mental health initiatives for the year, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Pauley.
Thank you, Sharon, very much. I really do appreciate that introduction, and I can't thank you enough everyone for being invited here to do a presentation. Then that was a great presentation by Dr. Berthadet as well, and speaking to some of the mental health, social emotional literacy that I can speak to as well. So I would like to start off and just introduce myself. My name is Cherise Polly, and I'm the mental health lead and the supervisor of social work and attendance counselor at the school board here. I think with the most important thing is across the school board and across the province, school social workers are really at a really key point of being really accessible for these students who spend a majority of their time in their schools. And so by being accessible, we're able to be there for that early prevention and to provide services that sometimes might not lead into further services within the community. Currently, we have this year, we have 13 permanent school social workers, as well as one contract school social worker that started in the middle of February, thanks to the ministry funding that we received. And again, having these social workers in here, sometimes it will eliminate the barriers that families might face. For example, parents might be working and not able to go to the outside counseling services, or for financial reasons coming into again, community organizations, or having to be on a bus, etc. So again, we have a great ideal place, as well as being able to be in a classroom and to be able to have conversations with the teacher, other support staff, principals, connecting with other community partners, and of course the student and the parent, and doing a very holistic assessment prior to providing intervention. And the most important thing is reducing stigma, which is again such a huge thing in our community and across the province. And mental health is again not. I always say it should be mandatory funding, because it really is something that we all, especially in this year, we've really had a lot of people struggle with, not only adults but our students. Along with our 13 permanent school social workers, one of the social workers actually is on the Ontario Association of School Social Workers, and she's a social worker on the advisory committee. And the intent of this committee is to work on the development, promotion, and advocacy of school social work for the purpose of improving the quality of education and life for children, families, and communities in Ontario. And I can't stress that enough. Again, being a part of our chief and managers of social work services, it's really nice that we're able to get together province-wide to see what's happening in other parts of the province and really advocating for school social workers to be in schools. And so this particular social worker will be invited to the one-day ministry day, that's this month, and they'll have the opportunity to connect with the different policymakers and with the Ministry of Education to inform them of their practice, as well as advocating for the needs of the students and social work roles in the province. One of the best things I could say that is happening in Ontario is School Mental Health Ontario. The ministry has provided a lot of resources in order for us to be able to get the services from School Mental Health Ontario. And what they do is they provide, they're an implementation support team that actually assists both myself and the superintendent, Dr. Pike, in highlighting some of the resources that they've developed and distributing throughout the schools. By helping school districts enhance student mental health through the use of these evidence-based strategies and services have really been helpful, especially for this year. And in particular, I know that not only do we participate in, but we also have members of our teams. Dr. Mark Crunwell was a part of some of the development of some of the resources that were spread throughout the province. The one that we really wanted to highlight this year, and again, it was so important, is that returning back to school. The first 10 days and beyond was a crucial document. It was a way of trying to connect with students when they come back into school, especially around the coming back to a warm, welcoming school. So a sort of very strong sense of safety and belonging and well-being at school. It was very stressful, not only for students, but for staff to come back and to be able to provide them with these first 10 days and beyond. It basically had different activities each day to try to include students in these activities and to try to get to know your students in a kind of different way. Unfortunately, that the way we had to obviously have safety protocols this year. Another thing that was developed most recently is the Student Mental Health Action Kit. And in this kit, we've actually released a lot of different resources. Again, these are evidence-based strategies, and some of the ones are, in the past, we used to use Supporting Minds, but this year they actually did a strategies at a glance, which again focuses on sort of strategies that they can do either virtually or in person regarding anxiety, sort of some of the strategies to help students within the classroom, and sort of tips for the teachers. Another thing that is recently being developed and implemented is the virtual tours. The virtual tours are developed through the Elementary Teachers Foundation as well as a clinician. And in this, there's different tours that, again, these are practical lessons in the classrooms, and some of them are, again, focusing on visualization, breathing techniques, distraction, and basically it really is focusing on stress management and healthy coping skills. Stress is, again, it's very, it's normal, but for this year, it certainly has increased for our students as well as staff, and certainly implementing these breathing techniques, visualization, and distraction techniques will be very helpful. And I know that in the future, we'll continue to use these strategies within the classroom. A few years ago, we actually, before even with COVID, we actually did promote our everyday mental health classroom resource cards. And these are cards that actually offered basically, again, different social and emotional skills that the teachers could provide in the classrooms. And another one thing that is in here that's not in here is the classroom conversation starters. I know that with School Mental Health Ontario, they have surveyed a lot of the students, and the students really, really, really want to know more about mental health. They want to know where to get help, how to recognize mental health. And so these class conversation starters that are promoted, again, through School Mental Health Ontario, provide that opportunity for teachers to be able to utilize them. At the Tier 1 level, it is really, if we look at the 3 different tiers, at a Tier 1 level, this is good for all. And then we go through Tier 2, which is good for some students, and Tier 3, which is very individualized and is more for school social work to become involved. But the most important thing is building capacity. Again, through School Mental Health Ontario, we used a lot of the resources in order to implement a 2.5-hour mandatory training on anxiety and returning to school and well-being and anti-bullying in September of 2020. This is on Brightspace, which is one of our learning platforms. And so staff can go back to this at any point and be able to renew and look at the documents in order to get a refresher. Also, our school social workers do staff presentations as well. And so these staff presentations are a variety of topics. Again, we know that caregiver and burnout, as well as staff burnout, has been something that we've presented over the years, but more so this year as well. We've done presentations on mindfulness, anxiety, depression, and a variety of other topics. This year, we actually, with a great partner in our community, we gathered with Maryville, and we collaborated with them, and we presented Coping Together, the Caregivers Seminar Series 2021. And in there, we had over 160 people registered for these presentations. And these presentations were on basically on emotional regulation, also on knowing when to seek help, building resiliency and hope, emotional regulation, building basically the becoming, there's different topics that actually are on our website now. And so this is, again, a really great partnership we've had with Maryville, and we're in discussion right now in order to see if we can provide any other presentations, and we're looking for feedback from parents in order to see what they would like. One of the presentations, that I was talking about is, again, a dual role as a parent and as an academic coach, which is, again, again, something that we've never had to do, but certainly this year has been again a year that we've had to be able to not only parent and also teach, but knowing when to set limits and be able to have fun as well with our kids. Another way of building capacity was our mental health minutes. And again, this mental health minutes is basically an email that goes out to all staff. And with that, is different articles on mental health supports that are open in the community. We provide the mental health, also different documents from School Mental Health Ontario that are recently they're constantly being released. And so when some of the documents are being released, it's sent out to all staff. As well as mental health minutes, we do post on our Greater Essex County District School Board or Wellbeing EDSB account. We also put stuff on Twitter. And of course, I can't say enough about our board website on mental health and well-being. Again, that's where you're going to find all the YouTube videos on Coping Together, Caregivers Seminar series, as well as you will find that we have resources. We have sort of the crisis resources, a 2-page document, as well as other resources, multiple different resources in our community, as well as you'll find that there's resources like different apps and on there. We also conducted a student survey in October, and we're going to be conducting in May as well. And this survey focused in on the school climate survey, what we did back in 2019, some of the same questions we asked. Again, it was basically around how they were feeling about being able to resolve things positively. Are they worrying? Are they stressing? And so that work came back. And again, it was very indicative of what is happening in our community. Our kids are stressed. And so that's why the focus, again, has been very much leading our work this year in the presentations that we are providing on stress and what School Mental Health Ontario is providing to our staff. And our last one is we're just starting a pilot program. It's our JK to SK tiered support program, which I'll be speaking to. All right, so the next part I'd like to talk about is staff and system consultations. The social workers provide a lot of work in this area, and this is not captured in stats, and so I can never tell you how much time is spent in this, but I can tell you a large proportion is this occurs. This is where we are available to talk to either teachers, administrators, about what might be going on with a student. And so in having those conversations, again, this is due to confidentiality reasons, we're not provided the student's name, but we're being consulted on with regards to an issue that might be occurring with the student. And after having that consultation, after having that consultation that is agreed upon, that maybe the school social worker could provide services, at that point, then the social worker will say, to make a referral. And then at that point, a signed consent form has to be obtained, as social work services are voluntary. So again, under our Ontario College of Social Services and Social Workers, we have to make sure that consent is given because of privacy and confidentiality. And at that point, the social worker will then contact the family and to obtain the consent and obtain very informed consent, because they have to know the risks and benefits of treatment, what happens to the records, as well as getting consent from the students that are basically probably over the age of 10. If you're able to understand treatment, they need to be being informed of, it has to be an informed consent. Again, this is voluntary. And in doing so, at that point, we're also able to go into the Ontario school records and consult with board staff, and then of course, gather information from the family and client. So this slide is a little busy, but I just wanted to break it down because I think that it's always to know how social work services are implemented. Again, at the very step one is what I referred to. Again, it's basically that there's something that's been identified by the school or the family. And again, it could be around school avoidance, personal adjustment, family adjustment, mental health, or even crisis. And once at step two, the informed consent happens where the school social worker calls the family, and these conversations can sometimes again take over an hour to have those to do that evaluation and assessment piece. From there on, the social worker does an assessment and determines whether they'll provide counseling within the school or they're going to refer them to outside partners. Again, depending on the nature of the situation, sometimes a community partner is the best again under the situation that we'd be referring a family, because they are the ones that are more specialized in that area, and that would be the best for the family. So sometimes we will still refer them out for that reason. And it does have to be impacting the students at school as well. And once it's agreed upon that we will be providing services for the student, what happens is that the student as well as the parent, we identify what the goal is that they're wanting to work on. Again, it is driven by the student or the client, I refer them, it is developed by the client and the parent in combination and determined from that way. And at this point, we do evaluation tools. We do score on different tools and do data measurement status. And we continue to do that through the intervention. And even at the very end, we do these assessment tools. And again, at some point during the evaluation, if we feel that ongoing social work services are needed, we do refer out to the community. And the social work services are brief in nature at our school. Typically, they're up to 6 sessions, and sometimes they go longer depending on the situation. And so at Tier 3, we refer out. The next thing I want to speak to you is about student presentations and group counseling. So this year, especially regarding the COVID-19 pandemic, the University of Michigan developed a Trails to Wellness group that was 7 sessions long, and we actually did do these group with high school students. Again, it was we tried to promote. It was very difficult, I think, because of the nature of what was happening in high school. I know that a lot of the high school students were really struggling with such a condensed schoolwork, the amount of time that is being spent. So I think that what we were seeing that were more the one-off presentations more than registering for a 7-session presentation. And so that we were hearing from the students, and then we went to doing class presentations. Again, we've done multiple presentations at schools, whether it's in elementary or secondary. And again, it was tailored to what the school is looking for and the student needs. But I can say that it was really more on with regards to anxiety and coping strategies. Certainly the focus, and it continues, will always be our focus. It's been for many years now on sleep. Our students have really, their sleep has been really disrupted. They're spending a lot of time on social media as well, and this is impacting themselves, and that they're becoming more anxious as well as a result of that lack of sleep. So again, we also have done presentations on healthy relationships as well as staff presentations. So we are always available to provide any presentations. We have a whole library of different presentations that we can provide to staff if needed. And we've done multiple PD events, and sort of in the past, we've done whole board-wide presentations on anxiety and on trauma. And so we continue to look forward to doing different presentations based on what the school is requesting. The next area I'd like to talk to you about is what our social workers provide is basically trauma and crisis support. So providing the individual crisis support, this is where an individual has basically will contact we have a protocol within the school board where if a student is having suicidal ideation, we have several staff that are trained in ASSIST, which is through Living Works. And it's basically where it's a 2-day training where the staff are trained on how to ask questions around the student who might have suicidal ideations, and then to be able to ask those questions and then contact and figure out what the next step is. And so sometimes the next step is contacting myself for a consult on that, or sometimes sending them directly to the hospital based on the situation. In that case, they will still contact me. But the thing is, if the student is having suicidal ideation and the need is for a school social worker to go out and to do an assessment, we get we get permission from the parent, because again, the parent or the legal guardian can choose to have our school social workers, which is typically what they agree upon, or they can go for an outside assessment based on their what they feel is best for them. And so we provide that for the families. Again, we have such a great relationship with Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare for the ones under the age of 16. What happens is if we know that a student is attending the hospital, we will provide that information if we've done an assessment to the worker at the Hotel Dieu Grace Hospital. They are the ones that do the assessments in the ERs. And by providing that information, the family doesn't have to tell in particular, the student doesn't have to tell their story twice. I know that for many families, to be able to tell that story twice is very difficult. And it's just a sort of a warm handoff. And with permission of the family, we are able to get an outcome. The family agrees to letting the school know what the outcome of the assessment is in the ER, and then we're able to tell the schools the outcome and any recommendations from that assessment. For the school-based crisis traumatic events, this unfortunately occurs when a student dies. These are very difficult situations, and unfortunately, we see this throughout the year, either through accidental or medical reasons. We have students that die. And so we do have both the social work and the psych services department that are available and that do go out to the school, and they will meet with the staff as well as students, depending on what the event is. And we do provide resources for the students and staff on how to handle the situation and what to recognize. Because again, sometimes for very many of them, that moment can be can be very traumatic, and that in the future symptoms come up and that they're wanting to receive support. So we might be there for the first 3 or 4 days, but knowing that the student may be okay with those 2 or 3 days that we're there, but for follow-up in weeks and months later, that we're available there based on again what might have occurred. Again, I just want to highlight, I'm sorry, going back to with the students that are hospitalized. Through Maryville as well, we have a great relationship. We have, if the student is admitted to the hospital at the Rotary Home at Maryville, which is a hospital bed program there, the staff there actually, with the permission of the family, will contact the school principal and provide information again on what the follow-up services are. Typically, depending on the age, the Maryville staff will, social workers will be providing support to the students after their discharge, if they're a teenager, and for the younger students, it's usually Regional Children's Center that is automatically immediately tied in and getting support. So those high-risk Tier 3 students are getting services. So social workers are also attendance counseling services as well. So unlike social work, attendance counseling services you don't need consent. That being said, they are very uniquely positioned to use their clinical skills and knowledge base in order to get back in the motivational interviewing and getting students back to attend school. Certainly this year has been, again, throughout the whole province, I know this has been the biggest issue that many school boards are seeing, and it's no different here. We are seeing a tremendous amount of attendance referrals that has occurred this year. Especially, I can say that in the elementary students, it has increased. With that being said, again, there's a variety of reasons why students are not attending. And the finding out and having those conversations, again, these conversations can be very lengthy because it is really finding out what's going on with what's happening for the family. And so for the family, it could be a variety of reasons. And just finding out if we can try to get away those barriers and try to get them back into school is what we really strive and look for. So we have 863 attendance files that are currently open to social work attendance counselors as of March 29th. And again, it continues to go up. This year, because of the attendance counseling services referrals that came in, we did hire two re-engagement attendance counselors services because it was affecting our ability to provide school social work in a timely manner. All right, so as well, we have a designated social worker attendance counselor for students who identify as Indigenous. She's a permanent half-time social worker, and she works from a place of awareness of the impacts of the colonization and intergenerational trauma while recognizing the resilience and abilities of Indigenous students and their families. She's a great resource. She knows what services are out there and in the community. She also, again, with regards to the Jordan's Principle, this year alone, has resulted in 11 psychological assessments, 11 pieces of technology, 13 one-to-one EA educational assistance support, and 3 specialized tutors based on those Jordan's Principles applications that she's completed this year. The next one is we're doing a pilot project regarding the development of self-regulation skills in kindergarten classrooms. And this was something that we wanted to focus on because the ministry is now, with regards to this year, there's no suspensions from kindergarten to grade 3. And so we know that this has always been a struggle, especially with some of the emotional regulation skills in the early years. And so what we wanted to do is to provide a pilot project team, and again, working with our special education department, working with a board certified behavior analyst and the social worker attendance counselors. So we've assigned one of the social workers primarily to do this pilot project starting this month until the end of June. And so with this, there will be weekly in-person implementation support that will be provided in the classroom by the social worker for about 7 schools, and ongoing support from the board certified behavior analyst worker. And all these strategies that are presented and applied are tied with the 4 framed kindergarten curriculum and will be applied to the whole classroom learning opportunities. The professional development packages will also be created with video modules of implementation and resources to staff to mimic and implement in all the kindergarten to grade 3 classrooms in collaboration with program department to build training into September 2021 in kindergarten professional development. And so, like Dr. Berthelm, she talked about we've years ago, I know that we did the emotional literacy kits. And so in combination with that, we're wanting to, again, focus really closely in on the kindergarten students. Along with the social workers, we have re-engagement attendance counselors. So these are not social workers, and their primary focus is on attendance. And so this year, like I mentioned, we have 1 permanent re-engagement attendance counselor. But that being said, we have a total at the end of March, well, almost at the end of March, we had already over 1,200 attendance files open. And so that was way too many. And so that we were able to hire 2 temporary re-engagement attendance counselors as of mid-December. And so with that, they currently have 336 referrals for them. So minus that, that's where the social workers are / attendance counselors have the rest. Again, their main focus is, again, engaging students of the compulsory school age in attending an educational program. The amount of referrals, these referrals this year, we've had to limit to what is under the enrollment registry guidelines from the ministry. And so the vast majority of the ones that we've received are students that have missed 15 consecutive days. So once the ministry dictates after 15 consecutive days, a referral to the attendance counselor has to be made, and so that's why the numbers have increased. Another part of the department is supervised alternative learning, or SEL. And so this is for students who are between age of 14 to 17 who are at risk of leaving school early. This program was put into place many years ago because of the Learning to 18 module. And so at some point it was, at 16 students would not attend school anymore, and they would go work, some of the students. Because of that, it's now, again, Learning to 18. We have lots of students, as you can see. We have approximately 80 students that are working this year primarily, and they're not attending school or taking any classes or anything. They're just working full time out in the community. And so they have to be approved, again, under the enrollment registry guidelines. They have to be approved under the supervised alternative learning. Again, just because of, again, Learning to 18, they have to be. And by being in supervised alternative learning, they're excused from attending school once they attend a committee meeting and they're approved. And so this is down, I can say, this year. Our numbers typically are in the 200 range for SEL, 200 plus. And I know that certainly the students that are working has fallen this year as well. I believe that some of the students that are on SEL, we have other students that are on SEL due to mental health. They're not able to attend school at all in previous years. And that was, this year it might be a little different because of virtual. I know that there are students that are able to attend school virtually. And that way, being able, that social anxiety that many of our students have, and the high school students suffering with the social anxiety, they're able to do virtual work. So I think that maybe some of that has been reduced because of that. With our supervised alternative learning committee, both our re-engagement attendance counselor attends the meeting, as well as myself attends the meeting on occasion. And the role is really trying to engage the student and finding out what can be other activities that can be, implemented. By having the Maryville community staff member, who is a social worker on the committee, really provides an opportunity for that social worker to provide information of the resources that are available at Maryville. And they have so many great resources, again, community outreach, anxiety classrooms, and again, their day treatment program. So it's a wonderful, I'm so happy that they're involved in the committee. A few years back, we ended up we did a pilot project with our supervised alternative learning teacher, and that teacher provides direct support for that student. We found that since having that teacher hired and providing that support to the student, having that direct support, we found that the students that are taking independent learning courses or taking other courses within the school, that basically we're having a more success rate in students completing credits. Again, this year, it's like last year, we're very happy that the ministry is providing us with more funding. Last year, we were provided funding. It was last minute, but we were able to do some individual counseling and psychoeducational groups. This year, we have more time to do some planning. So really, I think the focus, again, will be very much still providing that ongoing support. The social workers typically, like I said, do provide brief. We know that there is definitely a wait list, especially for the students that are at teenage years. There tends to be a lengthy wait list, certainly not for crisis, but we know that there is a wait list in our community for the adolescents. And so being able to continue with those students throughout the summer and maybe even to provide group counseling, we'll be able to provide more support for when they return in the fall. As well as, getting feedback from our student groups, we know that providing some psychoeducational groups has been very beneficial. And so we're looking at trying to develop some types of groups that more, again, I know that this year has been very difficult around engagement and, that sense of belonging. And so maybe again, not having a little bit of fun, but certainly not only having some kind of groups that social connection piece is really important. Again, we're also trying to, with the Maryville, to be able to develop presentations for parents, depending on what the needs and what we're hearing from the community. The big unknown, and for us this year, and again, we have so many, like I said, we have over 1,200 attendance files open right now. Typically, the majority are closed at the end of the school year and reopened if necessary in the fall. Unfortunately, this year, we do have a lot of students that are not attending at all, and so we will have to keep those files open. And so the focus will be very much so engaging with those students throughout the summer and try to see what kind of barriers and having them come back to school in September. And again, we're just in the preliminary stages of trying to figure out all the things that we can provide during the summer, and I'm looking for any feedback from people. I always like to leave on a good note, and so I know that it's been a very difficult year, and I know that we've had presentations where students provide that again, that voice and on the video, but I think that again, because of stigma, sometimes with consent, we didn't reach out to students, but I did want to have their voice heard, and so these are some of the notes that we've received from some of the students this year. And so I just want to highlight some of these ones. And again, these are ones that really talk about how having patience and being able to identify what kind of is happening for them, especially around the quadmaster. Again, I know that high school students are really struggling with the learning model. And again, the information being in such an intense and small amount of time and not being able to socialize. So being able to talk about their feelings is really important. Again, another one, and again, it is talking about being able to dedicating your life to making people like me to understand their emotions. It's really important. I think that the more time that we spend on not connected with other people, being able to talk about emotions is key. And being connected to a caring person in the school is crucial. And this last one, again, I love it because it's, again, somebody that's from the elementary school saying, I love that you help other people. So I wanted to end on that note. And then I was just open to any questions.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. And I love that you care about other people, to help the other people too. Are there any questions? We do have a question from Trustee Higgison. Go right ahead.
Thank you very much for that presentation. And I want to say, Miss Polly, my goodness, you have quite the portfolio there. That seems like quite a bit on any normal year, let alone this year. So thank you very much for, I'm sure, all the sleepless nights that you've had worrying about our students like we do. And I really wanted to thank you and your team for that. My question was, and I'm glad that you kind of touched on a little bit at the end, those that feedback from students. So I will say anecdotally, my family has experienced those kind of steps 1 through 3, and that chart that you gave us. And what you mentioned in that chart was that they kind of at level 3, they're we match them up with a community partner, or they kind of continue through the process, but it's our continuation, the ways that we support them kind of continue from there. And I'm wondering, so my daughter had an experience that resulted in us using some of our community partners in grade 7. She's now in grade 10, and still having regular contact with her school CYW that she finds incredibly useful for her. But it's had to adjust because she's in secondary school. She's got a cohort of 15. And so there's some of the coping mechanisms that she's been able to use had to adjust because of distancing and cohorting. So I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to how those kinds of adjustments have been made in the school, maybe some examples of how within the restrictions the school social work teams and CYWs and those sorts of things are able to adjust, just some examples of how they're able to adjust within the confines of that to meet the student needs of their goals and some of their tools that they're using.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. Because again, because of the amount of referrals, I know that typically if we provided services to students, say the previous year, and so typically we don't continue to see students because again, sometimes that's something we need to refer on. But in the situation that you're referring to, this is a different year altogether. So again, if somebody received services last year, it was like, we don't care what's going on, we'll see them again this year. And again, if it's 3 years down the line and we're not in the pandemic, it's booster sessions. What did work then? Maybe not work anymore. Let's kind of review some of the other strategies that might be had. What's in our toolbox? I can say that, again, I can't say enough about the social work and attendance counseling department. They have worked so hard. We are meeting them in person right from September. There's in person, they're meeting them in the schools, again, safely distanced and wearing all protective gear, but we are meeting with them in person. We also provide virtual counseling. So the vast majority of support is provided in person. That is still a preference by students. And which makes it more of a struggle this year, especially I'm going to go back to the secondary panel, because the secondary students their time is very limited in person. So the social workers have adapted, they've switched their schedule to start earlier in order to meet the demands of the students and trying to pull them in because, again, that is their preference, but we still do provide counseling through Microsoft Teams as well as telephone counseling. So we do provide that. And that's probably about 27% of our students at one point were receiving counseling through virtual. Last year, I know that it was when our schools were closed, we did not receive as much referrals. I think at that point, students were at home. I think everybody's trying to figure out what was going on. We were actually providing more support, I can say, to the parents. Parents were really struggling, as we all were, with what was going on. And so more of the referrals and conversations were with parents and just providing them where the supports were. So again, booster sessions are something that, again, the social workers are providing for previous students that have been seen.
I can personally say we were so grateful for that booster. My house, we got a phone call and then she's been kind of following up and it's wonderful that they're able to adjust to some of those needs and even kind of cut through their own anxiety about what they're encountering to kind of meet those students where they are. And I'm so grateful for it, and I know that our students are grateful for it too. So thank you for that.
Thanks for the question and the answer. I hope everybody who is watching, who's participating, or is seeing this days later, understands that our board has a unique position. When you say, Charisse, that you can't talk enough, you can't speak highly enough, about the department. We have a department. We have social workers and attendance counselors and re-engagement counselors and community partnerships. And not every school board has that kind of robust department. And it really is a spectacular bonus for our families. So thanks very much for all that work. I do have a question from Trustee Chin. Go ahead, Trustee Chin.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate what you have done during this pandemic. It's really important. And my question is that my internet is not very good today. I don't know if you have mentioned it or not. I see that a lot of kids now are getting addicted to electronic games or electronics. And do you have anything to do to handle this situation during the pandemic? And for the parents, I think they also need some education about how to handle these addiction problems. I wonder if you can prepare panels or some work groups to help those parents and kids. Thank you.
Thank you for that great question. Again, this has been an ongoing concern, or certainly the time that students are on electronics is increased. And again, I know that our community partners in the community have different presentations, and so this is something great that maybe we'll collaborate and come up with some great PowerPoints and suggestions. But again, I know that, again, Essex County Diversion, the Hotel Dieu Grace Healthcare has some great resources and programs that they have on this. But again, our students are spending a lot of time on social media, lots of times it's a distraction, quite honestly, for them. It's their coping way. They're not able to be out and about. So sometimes, that is the way they're doing, like many adults too, I want to add. So many adults are sitting there and on electronics as well. And now that it's summer out, we're able to go outside a little bit more and spend some time outside. So creating those daily routines, I can't say enough about it, and being outside, getting enough sleep and getting outside and looking after our bodies, eating healthy and everything else is really important for mental health.
Okay, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for Superintendent Pike or Ms. Polly? I have just one question, and maybe you could clarify it for me. When we talk about attendance, what we have heard in previous presentations, and certainly anecdotally and from parents, etc., and students, there are students who were in virtual school and who aren't engaging. And how do you, I know we take daily attendance, that's required, but how do we actually know that daily attendance virtually means that there is a student there and is actually engaged, and not somebody who's just signed on and watched the clock go by when they're somewhere else, no interaction? How do we know that they're actually attending?
Again, that's a great question. I think the teacher, through handing in assignments and work, that's how they're going to find out whether they're actually participating. That being said, again, students are struggling. So finding out why they're not able to. I know for students that I personally have seen, they struggle with the camera on. So again, even though it's virtually, that social anxiety to have their camera on is too much for them. And so they don't want the camera on to be centered out in that sense, right? And so again, they might not have the camera on, but they're participating. I think that, I think that, I know I work in an academic field, but I can't say enough about mental health. You can't learn if you're not doing mentally well. And so really focusing on, and again, I think that our board does a great job in that, and it's very much promoting mental health, and you're always on a continuum. So again, if the students are not able to learn, then we need to find out what's going on for them and try to address those barriers, whether it's mental health, whether it's Wi-Fi issues, whether it's, again, different variety of issues that our students are struggling in order to be on virtually. And again, I'll go back to, we have, like I said, 1,200 referrals for attendance. You add on another 800 or 900 for social work. We're over 2,000 for 17 staff, which is a as such a large amount. And again, I just can't say enough about the team, and I'm very proud of them, and I miss seeing them. I can tell you that connection. We're not able to do the debriefing like we normally do and to be able to have that team meeting. So we even though we do it virtually again, but it is something to be able to be together, to be able to have that really great conversations. I know, again, School Mental Health Ontario does great training on evidence-based therapy. And again, I just want to promote that our staff are receiving this training. That's very focused and is very crucial for the work that we do in schools.
Well, thank you again, from all my colleagues, from parents, from families. Thank you so much. The irony is not lost that you too miss the collegiality of in-person.
We all miss that connection piece, don't we?
Exactly. So thank you for that very powerful presentation. And thanks for all the questions too, colleagues.
Thank you.
So we're ready to go on to item G3, which is a 3-minute video presentation on virtual school student engagement outside of the classroom. And Superintendent Howitt, could you please hit go?
Sure. Just so everyone knows, it's everything outside of the classroom, including the announcements. And I think you'll find this quite enjoyable, especially the student who is pretending to be Principal O'Neill of the elementary virtual school. So with that, I'll let the video play.
Hello everyone, Dustin here from the Greater Essex Virtual School. This year we've had many opportunities to rethink the way that we deliver educational programming. Our team's vision is that each student experience is meaningful and relevant to their needs, both during class and beyond. By focusing on student engagement, we've unleashed the creativity of our educators who continue to find new ways of showcasing students' strengths and abilities. What does this look like? Let's have a look.
Good morning, Galaxy. Please stand up for the O Canada. Please be seated. Why did the teacher wear sunglasses? Because her class was so bright.
What do you do when a foot is broken? You tow it home.
Hi, my name is Kate Hahn, and I am one of the homework advisors who has been providing support for both teachers and students throughout the school year. During tutorials, homework advisors and teacher volunteers are able to work with students either individually or in small groups.
Mr. Pez here with the elementary virtual school. Don't forget to fill out the virtual school homework help form. You can get help from Monday to Thursday, 5 to 8.
We've implemented the Finish Strong Friday tutorial program. In the small groups, students can ask questions, screen share, and work to reinforce learning goals.
My name is Evelyn, and I'm one of the peer tutors at the virtual school.
I like the book club because you get to read a whole bunch of books, and I really like to read.
Welcome to Miss Mackay's Chess Club.
Hi, my name's Ariana, and I am enjoying Glee.
Hi, my name is Ella, and I enjoy Rocket League because I like meeting new people.
This is Project Quarantine, a podcast made by students for students. Each episode we talk about topics we think will concern or will interest the student body.
In Minecraft Club, students get to create their dream school and express themselves artistically using blocks. In Tabletop, they get to make new friends, and in Rocket League, they get to compete with each other and have fun.
Stay healthy and be connected and keep learning. Bye-bye!
As we move forward in our journey, we continue to look for ways to support our students, both in the classroom and beyond.
We have a question from Trustee Simcoe Hatfield, is it?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit off topic, but we've had a lot of information about the virtual learning, about the in-class learning. But the group we haven't really heard much about are the many students that are doing the paper packages. And I have 2 grandkids that are participating in the paper packages, and I happened to ask them this weekend if they ever hear from their teacher, and the one said she hears from her teacher once a week. The other one said she never hears from a teacher. So I just wonder if at some point we could maybe hear about the expectations and the delivery of the paper packages, because I see great things happening on the virtual learning and the in-class learning, but I'm wondering if maybe there aren't the same kind of opportunities in the learning model for the paper packages.
Certainly, through you, Madam Chair, yes, we can certainly bring information to the Board of Trustees to highlight the correspondence program. And just in terms of the number of times that correspondence teachers are to be connecting with their students is a minimum of 2 times a week. But I would be glad to bring information back at a future time.
2 times a week. Oh, that's interesting. Thanks.
Can I ask just clarification on that? How many students we have in the system that are using the correspondence package?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's over 2,000 students.
Yeah, it's still a large number. I remember that.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
I know people have switched, back and forth and different things. I was just wondering to sort of today's snapshot. So yes, we can look forward to a report on that in the future. Thanks for that question and the answer. And we have another question from Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Clara, I just had a question. With all these programs we're seeing and the great work that's being done and initiatives that have been taken on during the pandemic, what about the math task force? You don't hear too much about the math task force anymore. Is there anything going on there, or is it being set aside a little bit until we get through the humps of the pandemic?
Thank you for the question. And yes, math is still important to us in the Greater Essex. Professional learning is still occurring, but in a different way, in a virtual way, after school for teachers during the summer. We have introduced the new math curriculum this year with supports for our educators, but we're looking forward to returning to the plan that we had in place and hopefully for the fall. But please know that work continues to happen in terms of support around learning with our staff, and messaging around the math task force is still in play.
Thank you. I think it's important that we keep a connection there.
Very much so. Thank you.
Thank you. And Trustee Hickison has a question.
Thank you very much to you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you for this presentation and for the fact that we're going to keep seeing these things. I know in some of our COVID Communications Committee that the work that we did over the summer on that initiative, that this was one of the things that we would hope was going to happen, that we'd be able to see kind of learning in all of our spaces. So I'm really grateful for this initiative, and I want to thank you for that. My question is around, I had this question about Finish Strong Friday. I think that's a really cool thing. And then one of the students maybe answered the question for me about a club that she was in, and I'm wondering how many of these of the things like Finish Strong Friday or the clubs, the chess clubs and things like that they're joining, that students are connecting across with each other, with peers, and are connecting across things that aren't maybe our traditional home schools, and how many of those things are happening from a sort of global virtual school perspective, more so than a classroom experience perspective within the virtual school.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is happening through the virtual school, and that has been one of the items that students have identified as a plus in being in the virtual school, is being able to connect with students from all across the system. And that is one of the innovations that we're considering and expanding in connecting students across the system moving forward. So that's one of the lessons we've learned that we think we'll be able to take forward in connecting kids.
And supplemental, if I could, I think you hit on it a little bit right there, was just I'm sure that some of this information kind of goes into that that committee that is meeting about our what Greater Essex virtual schools may look like in the future. And I think one of the most important pieces of that is our kind of local connections to each other and our connections to our local staff and our teachers here, that when they end up back in schools, God willing, one day they end up back in schools, they'll still feel that connection with each other, with students from other schools within the board, with teachers that they may not have had the chance to get to know. And I want to stress how important that is for me to see as a board member, for me to see as a person who's invested in Greater Essex, and for a person who's really proud of the kind of work that's being done by our staff and by our students locally within our virtual school. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
GEC DSB proud. This is excellent. Thank you very much for that. And we will have that as a standing item until we don't have to wear masks anymore. So there you go. Excellent. Any other questions before I go on? Any other questions on G3? Okay. We're at H. There aren't any delegations. We have no notification of anyone on the speakers list this evening. No new business and no reports other than what we've received as presentations tonight. We're at L, trustee question period. Are there any other questions of this committee? And we have a question from Trustee Sartori.
Thank you. Yep, I had a question about the introduction or the addition of ASL to the curriculum offerings in, I think, coming up this September. And I'm just curious for some more information about it. About all I know about it is that it's a new addition to the course selection for students in secondary. That's to start this coming September, and I'm curious if that is still on track across the province, if it's mandated for all school boards, and if it isn't, I'm wondering if we're a board that will be implementing it, and I'm wondering what grades and what program credit students would achieve. I think it's a really interesting offering. So, if someone has information on that.
Superintendent Howard?
Yes, I'd be glad to.
I think you muted yourself, Superintendent Howitt.
Sorry, my apologies. The ministry did notify us about ASL course offerings, and we did put that out available to students through My Blueprint. And there's been quite an uptake in terms of interest by students, which is really interesting and delightful. We did also have a meeting with the ministry because we do require individuals to be qualified to teach the course, and presently they're in the curriculum hasn't been released yet. That's one thing we're waiting for. And the other piece is the qualification through the OCT in terms of the additional qual has not been finalized yet, and probably won't be ready until sometime in the fall. So I know, so we have an interest.
For September?
And, we're not quite prepared to launch the course, and that we have to have the appropriate people to support it. And I look to my colleague, Superintendent Houston, as well, if she'd like to add anything to it from an HR perspective. But we do want to definitely offer the course. There's interest from our students. It might be a delayed response, possibly to second semester, but I pass it to Superintendent Houston.
I'm just going to interrupt and say OCT is the Ontario College of Teachers, and you're talking about a qualification that's a professional qualification in order to teach. Yeah, okay. Superintendent Houston.
Sure. I have one more piece of information to add to that. So we did put out to our teachers in secondary school to see if anybody did by chance have proficiency in ASL, and we do have one teacher who has it. And so we are applying for a letter of permission to the Ministry of Education, and very likely we'll be able to offer one section of it at one of our secondary schools starting in first semester of next year.
Okay. And just a follow-up question. So are all boards mandated to offer it then, or is it I don't know, by choice, I guess, depending on availability in terms of quals.
My recollection of the memo that came out was that we were required to post it for students. Okay. And then there was the follow-up piece around the qualification and having a qualified person, and the curriculum is following. So right. The trains haven't quite met, but the good thing is that there's an interest from our students and that we will be offering it slowly to start, but I'm sure it will expand based on interest. So that's really great.
I think that's great. Thank you. I look forward to hearing more. Thanks.
Thanks for that question and answer. It's always interesting, isn't it, when the announcement comes before we can actually kind of deliver. But that makes it, urgent. Okay. Trustee Leclerc has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. So we have been in a modified gray lockdown for about a week now. Today we heard that Peel Region is going to online learning effective tomorrow. There's an article in the Windsor Star that just came out that talks about the local Board of Health office saying that our students are still safe. I'm wondering what discussions have taken place with the local health unit, if there has been discussions. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what is the line that we would need to cross to have us be put back into an online learning situation? One of the things that was kind of concerning this weekend was the number of emails and the number of cohorts and classes that were dismissed. So I'm just wondering if there's been discussions about what it's going to take, or where are we going to be at in terms of infection rates in their classes before we go to an online learning model.
It's Director Kelly, through you. And Superintendent Pike can add to this, I'm sure, because I know that she's been in communication as well. But we haven't had any indication that there would be a closure. I know that it would be monitored. Obviously, the other health units, Toronto, Guelph area, I think Wellington, Guelph, and Peel have made those decisions, and I think their case situation is quite different. And you're right, the article today did indicate that that they hope to keep schools open. So we've had some conversation. In fact, today we had conversation with the health unit. We do regularly, but we haven't had any indication. Dr. Pike, you might have information that would suggest the sort of guiding principles of that decision, but I certainly don't have any more details on it. So I look to you.
Thank you for that. And I do not have any more guiding when it comes for the health unit in terms of what their threshold is to determine if we're going to be moving on to online or not. It seems to be extremely busy the last little bit. I'm sure you're tired of getting emails from me. I did have the stats pulled, though, to figure out where we were compared to last fall. So from September to December, we had a total of 115 cohorts, and from January to April, we've had 56. Perhaps it's just because it feels like it's all been the last week where we've had lots, but right now they're saying no, our schools are safe, they are community, there are not school transmissions, there are community transmissions coming into the school, and I certainly talk to the health unit every day about one issue or another, and certainly will keep everyone posted.
Supplemental, Madam Chair. So I guess my question is, from an administrative point of view, you're comfortable with the guidance that we're receiving?
If I can speak to that, I am absolutely comfortable and confident in our health unit and helping our community stay safe.
Yeah, I continue to be impressed by the good communication and the regular meetings where they call us all together from the boards. I feel very confident in their leadership and in their communication.
Well, thank you very much for that. Just supplementally, Dr. Wajid was on today, the daily update, etc. And those specific questions about enacting a Section 22, etc. were asked and answered. and were couched in the terms of the snapshot of today and increasing cases, community spread, etc. The 3 days that are left of this learning week and spring break, and that really exact monitoring. So I think it's a very valid question, and I think a legit answer too. You know, we have a very good partnership, and I think there's a very open dialogue. Nobody's trying to pull anything. You know, it's very, very open, and a very fluid situation. So, you know, we just have to keep posted. Trustee Leclerc, if I could ask, you did ask about Peel declaring, etc. There are some declarations of school boards that are making decisions outside of their health unit. Was that part of your question, or were you just specifically asking about the health unit call?
No, I was just noting that some decisions have been made elsewhere in the province and how it compares to where we're at. So I appreciate the answer.
Yeah, if I could, through you, Madam Chair, I believe in the areas that I'm aware of that those decisions have been in consultation with the health unit in every case.
They have, but I know they were leading. The board was leaning very heavily, so that was great that they had support and that consultation.
I've spoken to a number of directors. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes. All right. Any other questions? Trustee question period. Okay. We're on item M, notices of motion. Any notices of motion for this committee? Hearing none. We are on N, announcements. Do we have any announcements? Any announcements for education? I have a few, if anybody doesn't. Oh, okay. I just want to announce that as actually shared briefly in the arts presentation, the GEC DSP is once again hosting the digital photography contest. And this year, we're going to continue with a virtual display of student submissions from all grade levels in 3 categories: black and white, color, and digitally enhanced. These are spectacular if you've seen the submissions and the winners from years past. We know lots of students are preparing submissions, which are due in early May. So get those cameras out and see what we can put together by early May. We look forward to seeing the outstanding creativity of student perspective and work in the very near future. I also want to make an announcement that the OBSPA, the Ontario Public School Board Association, is offering ongoing PD, and it's aligning very nicely with our presentation this evening about arts and what an impact it can make. Our next speaker is this Thursday, April 8th at noon. No registration is required, but they do, if you can send an email, you would have gotten one email just to let them know how many to expect. But Tyler Stewart from the iconic Canadian music group Bare Naked Ladies is the keynote on the arts in public education. And he shares some really personal impact, so much so that the entire band thanked all music educators everywhere during their Canadian Music Hall of Fame induction speech at the 2018 Juno Awards. And there'll be a question and answer after that presentation this Thursday. So join in via Zoom and let Ms. Devine know at OPSPA that you're joining. Also, the next time we meet, this committee, it'll be Education Week, if it keeps with the tradition of it being celebrated in the first week of May. I went on the ministry website and I couldn't see 2021 Education Week noted, but it has always been the first week of May. So I'm going to assume it's May 3rd to 7th. And I'm looking forward to celebrating examples of how our students and staff keep public education the cornerstone of an informed and innovative, caring and creative civil society during Education Week when we meet again. There is going to be also an Ontario Student Nutrition Program Education Week contest, so look for that in further announcements in social and regular media. And I think that's it. So if there aren't any other announcements, I can declare this meeting adjourned, and we'll take a short bio break and reconvene into the Standing Committee on Operations and Finance. So over to you, Chair Sipkar.
Hi, everyone. I guess, do we want to take a few minute break? I wasn't sure that we were going to.
You may not want to.
Okay, I think I'm just gonna dive into it. It's 9:10 over here, so trustees need to excuse themselves. They're welcome to do so, but I'm gonna jump right in. So I'll call this meeting to order at 9:10. I believe all trustees are still in attendance as per our previous meeting. Any declarations of conflict of interest? Oh, sorry, approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover? Trustee Cheen. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Higgison. I was made aware that there's somebody who registered to be on the speakers list today. So with that information, there's an additional item on item I. Any discussion, so I guess that would be an amendment. So any discussion on the approval of the agenda? Seeing none, I'm just going to go to any opposed. Seeing none, that carries. Declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing none, continue on. Item E1, approval of minutes from February 2nd, our last committee meeting. Can I get a mover? Trustee Cheen, seconded by Trustee Burgess. Any discussion on that item? Okay, seeing none. Any opposed? Okay, that passes. So business arising from the minute. Seeing none, you guys are really quiet tonight. Seeing none, we'll get right to presentations from our administration. So the first item then is G1, which is a ventilation update, which was requested in a previous meeting. So I'll turn it over to Superintendent Armstrong.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to have Julianne Hinchliff, who is our Manager of Facility Services, and she is going to take you through an update on our ventilation systems.
Sorry, everyone. I just had to unmute myself. Can everyone see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and I welcome the opportunity to share this information with everyone. The aim of this presentation is to provide an update on ventilation to the Board of Trustees and the actions taken to date. This is based on previous facility services assessment utilizing the ASHRAE, which is the American Society of Heating and Air Conditioning Engineers, reopening of schools guidelines with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. We will include a brief overview of the various types of ventilation systems found throughout the board sites and their operations under COVID conditions. So, forced air ventilation systems, I thought it'd be a good time to kind of explain how forced air ventilation systems work. A fan, which is that black thing in the middle there, is used to force air into a space through filters, a heating element, and potentially a cooling element. This fan power draws air from the outside and from the existing space at a certain ratio, depending on the position of the dampers, which can open or close to control the amount of each type of air, whether it's outside air or return air, that enters the space. Dampers move to maintain a certain temperature in the mixing chamber, which you see there, so that the required amount of outdoor air enters this chamber, but it is not cold enough to freeze any heating elements, which is our biggest concern. Outdoor air requirements or outdoor air ventilation is in every case legislated or governed by the Ontario Building Code. There are various numbers based on the age of the school. The latest Ontario Building Code, I believe, requires 15 cubic feet of outside air per occupant in the space. As air is forced into the room, it is pushed out of the room in the form of return air. A certain amount of the return air has to be exhausted as it is replaced with outdoor air. And the volume of air coming into the room must be roughly the same at all times. In a passive ventilation system, an exhaust fan is used to actually pull air out of the space as opposed to forcing it into a space. This fan power draws air out of the space, forcing outside air to enter through windows, walls, leaks, and this is considered the ventilation of the room. The air that enters the room through these passive methods, whether it's the windows or the walls or leakage through the walls, is unconditioned air, which means it is whatever the temperature is outside, which is why this is not an ideal scenario, but was fully within compliance of the Ontario Building Code in the 50s and 60s. And still, even to this day, this is an allowable method of ventilating. Heating in these cases is usually provided by a radiator under the window, but there is no control of the outside air. In this case, in the case you see here, which is actually a home setting, a passive vent is supplied in the wall where in our schools, the designers relied on infiltration through open windows and leakage through walls. Schools or additions built after 1995 to present. The Ontario Building Code had a significant change after 1995. So for most of our schools built after 1995, or that have had major mechanical renovations after 1995, the forced air ventilation systems would typically operate following ASHRAE Standard 62 for ventilation. This standard has been updated many times, and so therefore some buildings may be slightly different. And the Ontario Building Code adopts the ASHRAE Standard 62 for ventilation. Every time a major mechanical upgrade happens in one of our schools, we are required to meet the ASHRAE 62 standard in every upgrade. Such forced air systems are further defined as HVAC, heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. This would include varying volumes of fresh outdoor air based on temperature and mixing of both supply and return. Schools that are built prior to 1995, so for most of those schools built prior to 1995, these systems would operate with one or more of the following parameters. Some of our schools actually operate with 100% outdoor air ventilation rate with no recirculation of return air. This would also include filtration and conditioning of the air. Many of our older schools, like the 1920s and 30s, schools built in that era, actually have no recirculation of air. The air comes in and the air goes out without any reintroducing of the same air. Dr. David Suzuki Public School also has that same feature. The amount of fresh air that's brought in is always based on outdoor air. Air would then be allowed to exhaust through vents to the outside. So schools typically built in the 1920s and 30s employed such a system of ventilation. Other schools have ventilation with individual classroom, what we call unit ventilators, with varying degrees of outdoor air intake based on the ASHRAE standard at the time. This would include supplying air and return air mixing in the ventilation unit with filtration. These schools were built through the 1940s to present. Campbell, which has been recently redone in the last 10 years, continues to use unit ventilators as a method of ventilation. And then the third option, or the third way that schools were ventilated is through exhaust fans in individual classrooms that rely on passive ventilation as described recently or previously through the building envelope, which in our case would be our windows. And these schools, or these additions to schools, were mainly built in the 1950s and 60s. So in reviewing our ventilation systems, it was determined that 28 schools or additions have passive ventilation systems that rely on an exhaust fan and radiators along the wall under the windows. All other schools have a type of forced air system, including unit ventilators, energy recovery ventilators, heat recovery ventilators, constant volume air handlers, variable air volume air handlers, and rooftop package units. What all of these type of forced air systems have in common is that outdoor air is introduced at a pre-described or prescribed rate and forced into the school. This is a list of all our passive ventilation schools. Most of the schools are partially passive ventilation. There's very few schools where the entire school is passive, but there are a handful there. Many of the older additions in schools or the original buildings in schools on this list are what would be passive ventilation. Again, as additions are added, the building code of the time applies, and ventilation rates will change based on the knowledge of the time. So in response to COVID-19 for ventilation, we employed 4 strategies, which are listed here and which we'll discuss in more detail as we move forward. Strategy number 1 was increasing ventilation rates in our schools. We have reprogrammed all our forced air ventilation systems to ensure ventilation in schools is at 100% outside air is operating at 100% outside air until such a time as occupant comfort cannot be maintained, which we experienced in February as an example. We have to then slowly reduce the outside air in our systems because outdoor air will be increased to 100%, except under the following conditions. When thermal comfort cannot be maintained, which means we cannot heat the space anymore in the forced air system, or the outdoor air is below 35 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius. When mixing the air does not allow the mixed air to go down below 35, which may harm equipment and also for sure comfort requirements. Again, outdoor air is never turned off because we are required to bring in a certain ventilation rate or outdoor air rate all the time, no matter what the conditions are outside. And heating and cooling HVAC equipment is appropriately sized to handle the amount of outdoor air required per occupant. Based on COVID, COVID recommendations or ASHRAE recommendations during this time, we are trying to increase the outdoor ventilation rates to get as much dilution in our air as much as possible. In going forward with increasing ventilation rates, the forced air ventilation systems where the amount of outdoor air could be increased. We had many of those type of systems where we could increase the outdoor air in a majority of our schools and did not impact comfort. Over the colder winter months, we had to reduce some of the outdoor air. However, now that the weather is appropriately mild, we can then start increasing outdoor air into our spaces. There are some systems where forced air systems where the amount of outdoor air could not be increased. These are systems that were designed to supply at all times fixed amount of outdoor air for the required ventilation requirements of the space. The calculations for the amount of outdoor air required is described in ASHRAE Standard 62, and no adjustments to those ventilation rates is possible. As seen here, 14 systems, which is not schools, it's systems, which could be a small addition, are 100% outdoor air, which are schools like Prince Edward and Queen Victoria. And then there are 13 systems in our schools that are fixed outdoor air, which cannot be adjusted. Those would mainly be used for things like gyms, maybe some storage rooms. Those are only 13 of the hundreds of systems that we do have. Strategy number 2, as recommended by ASHRAE, was to increase the operating time. So as part of the pandemic response, ASHRAE issued some recommendations for improving the indoor air dilution rate. One of the recommendations was to increase the amount of time that equipment operates. The recommendation was to add 2 hours of operation before a typical equipment start and add 2 hours at the end of the day. So you can see on this slide, what we would typically run would be 7 a.m. till 30 minutes past the last bell. And now we're running from 4 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. Again, 4 a.m. for us is many hours before our schools start. So occupancy in those schools are typically minimal. The third strategy talked about increased ventilation to either a MERV 13 or a MERV 14. MERV stands for Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value. MERV ratings are on a scale of 1 to 20, and depending on the minimum size of particle, a filter can be expected to capture. A filter with a MERV rating of 5 to 8, which is what we would typically use, captures particles greater than 5 or 3 micrometers, which would include things like mold, pet dander, and aerosol sprays. This is the typical filter for most forced air ventilation systems. A filter with a MERV rating of 9 to 12, which is what we are currently using, captures particles greater than 1 micrometer. This includes most dust and common pollutants. Hospital laboratories use these as well as other systems that require that level of pollution control. All filtration has an effect on the operation of the equipment, and increasing filtration and increasing the MERV rating on a filter beyond a certain point could actually reduce the amount of total airflow, which would result in lower ventilation rates and also reduced occupant comfort. Facility services improved filtration on all forced air units from a MERV 8 to a MERV 13, both for the systems where we could increase the amount of outdoor air and the systems with fixed amount of outdoor airs. Air purifiers are being utilized in schools or portions of school buildings that rely on passive ventilation, where forced air systems do not exist. Through our review of our ventilation systems, we determined the best approach to support the learning environments that rely on mostly passive ventilation during the pandemic was to supplement the current design with portable air purifiers. These passive ventilation systems currently relying on window infiltration in conjunction with the room exhaust to provide ventilation to these spaces. The criteria we used to select the spaces where these air purifiers were placed included no forced air system exists, and operable windows are the primary source of outdoor ventilation. These units will only be utilized while there's an active pandemic, and these portable units contain a HEPA filter and a UV light. Individual schools were notified about the placement of these units and their installation. And we instructed all occupants who received these units not to adjust the operation of these units or relocate them. These units have been set up and will be maintained by the Facility Services Department. There will be no need to make any adjustments to these units, and they plug into a regular electrical outlet. The unit also discharges vertically as opposed to horizontally, which doesn't impact the breathing zone of the occupants of the space. Although these are not required by OBC and ASHRAE, They were an additional supplemental to address any concerns in these passive ventilation systems. Strategy number 4, just as another criteria where forced air systems do not exist, where operable windows are the primary source of outdoor ventilation, which may be utilized in colder weather, will only be utilized while there's an active pandemic. And there's the number of air purifiers that we have used. We have 390 air purifiers deployed in our system, 100 in offices and 290 in classrooms. And these are the schools where the air purifiers are deployed. So just in a conversation about comfort and PPE, which I know is a great concern with the added levels of PPE that are required to be worn, facility services will use our best efforts to mitigate comfort issues during the warmer weather. We continue to maintain and operate our air conditioning systems, and with the increased operating hours, meaning you're air conditioning the space 4 or 5 hours prior to occupants coming into the space should feel more comfortable. Open windows, we're going to have staff open windows as much as possible as the weather improves. We have to continue to required and use cooling centers as much as possible, which would be most of the libraries in our system. The use of existing window air conditioning units, which are installed in some of our schools, is permitted because it's a much higher discharge and goes over the breathing zone of the occupants, where portable fans are currently prohibited of the pandemic because of the ventilation patterns that it creates. So with that, I will entertain any questions that anyone has.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm just looking in the chat now. It looks like I'll go to Trustee Burgess and then I'll go to Trustee Halberstadt after that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, why would we only be utilizing portable air filters while there is an active pandemic if they are actually mitigating stale air, particularly in enclosed classrooms that have passive ventilation that really doesn't serve well to, give good ventilation? Why would we not continue to use those, particularly interior rooms in, buildings that were in 50s, 60s with no windows?
Through you, Madam Chair, we can certainly consider that as we go forward. We own these systems now, or these air purifiers, and we can certainly consult with senior administration to determine the best use.
Is there a supplemental there?
Totally different second question. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Halberstadt?
Yeah, thank you, Juliana. Yeah, the concerns I'm getting are obviously about the real hot weather that's going to be coming. And is there anything more we can do to mitigate the red hot weather? I know Hugh Beaton, for one, the third floor of the Hugh Beaton, it was a pressure cooker, like an oven last year, and there wasn't much of a place they could go. The libraries are cooling rooms. Music rooms are cooling rooms, I understand, and grade 8 rooms. Is that going to be the same this time? And at what point do we say, hey, this is too much? We should look at maybe sending the kids home, or what else can we do? I know masking is something now that we have to deal with, where last year we didn't. And I know you kind of addressed it, Juliana, but maybe those are a lot of questions, but I wonder if you could do your best to answer them.
Well, thank you. I will certainly start to answer that question. Unfortunately, I can't answer all of it. We run into this issue every year, and some of our 1950s and 60s schools certainly struggle. And yes, you're right, even Hugh Beaton, which would have like a fairly good forced air ventilation system, it is a struggle. The second floor of Massey's the same way. The added stress this year is the fact that we cannot use portable fans, which we would have been able to, and many schools had them and still have them. But because of the ventilation pattern, it's a little bit difficult to use. We continue to do the best we can. One of the nice things that I can comment on is that with new schools coming on board, the more new schools that come on board, we're increasing the amount of schools that have air conditioning, which is, I think we're now almost 65-ish%, if not 70% of our schools or portions of our schools actually have air conditioning. And so we continue to try to mitigate as much as we can. Some of those 1950s and 60s schools are always going to be a struggle. They're not designed for any kind of conditioned air or any kind of air conditioning. And I look to senior administration to kind of answer the second part of that question, which is, when is enough enough? I know that in most of our schools, according to the Occupational Health and Safety Act, we would never meet the threshold of when to dismiss a staff member out of the space. But I definitely would look to senior admin for a little bit more direction on that question.
It's Director Kelly. I don't know if Superintendent Armstrong was planning to answer that question, but we do have a number of things in place. We have not closed schools for the purposes of heat. I guess we would look to that if it needed to be, but it's certainly not a practice that we would normally be engaging in. Again, that's something I guess we'll have to look at and consider what other kind of things we can put in place to make sure that things are cooler. As that we're working on it, but I guess we'll have to see where we are at that time. We will have to consider some options. Superintendent Armstrong, did you want to add anything or?
Thank you, Director Kelly. No, I think you summed it up perfectly. Any decisions in terms of whether we needed to close a space or a school because of heat conditions would be a decision that the director would make. And as Ms. Hinchliff has indicated, there are a variety of strategies that we're suggesting, opening windows, making use of outdoor classrooms or space outside underneath shady areas might also be an alternative. We do recognize, particularly now that everyone is wearing masks and our staff are wearing not just masks, but also protective eyewear, that it can be a little bit challenging when we get to the warmer months. So, we're cognizant of that and we'll do the very best we can. Thank you.
Yeah, just a supplementary. What about the fans, Mrs. Hinchcliffe? Is that a dictate coming from the health unit that we can't use fans, which have been used to some effect, positive effect in the past because of the pandemic? Could we ask the health unit if we can use those, or is that something that we've decided upon?
Oh, no, we don't make our decisions about things like that in isolation. The Ministry of Education guidelines for opening schools spoke specifically about portable fans, and that was supported by our Board of Health. And as Julia just comments is in the chat, it forces an air current from one student to the next, and it moves around just too much. If somebody in the room had COVID, it would circulate throughout the room, and that is absolutely the last thing we want. Window air conditioners that are a much higher level, we normally put them higher, closer to the ceiling, blow above the students' heads, which is why the Board of Health says those are okay. And even the air purifiers blow up, straight up. So yeah, portable air fans, portable air, and I'd love to be able to give options to have staff use them. But unfortunately, during this time, they are prohibited, and that's supported by several entities.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to Trustee Chin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question actually is similar, and especially in Massey School, there are a lot of students who are working hard towards the higher education academic career, and those parents do worried about the ventilation system in the school, in the building, and there is no air conditioning there. And I asked several times before, and the senior administration always mentioned that because of the cost is kind of huge, and that's why they just leave it there. The parents, they do suggest that if the cost is really huge, how about the window air conditioner or other kind of air conditioner, which can make the classroom cooler. And also the parents asked if they can donate to have the air conditioner build up in the building. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. Massey Secondary School had a massive ventilation upgrade less than 2 years ago. All the unit ventilators in the school over 2 years were replaced, and which actually meet today's current building code in terms of ventilation. Because Massey was built in the 50s and 60s, it is not designed for air conditioning. So one of the things that happens when a building is not designed for air conditioning, when hot air meets cold air, whether it's through a wall, whether it's through a window, it's not an ideal environment. What happens is you get condensation when hot and cold air mix, which in some porous surfaces could actually cause mold growth. Like if there's a drywall partition, if there's carpeting, if there's curtains, if even on windows we've seen mold growth. So because these schools were never designed for air conditioning, they don't do well with air conditioning. We have a policy that governs where air conditioning goes, and I would kind of ask you refer to that. We also have a policy around donating infrastructure and donating things and any of that stuff. But window air conditioning causes a couple of problems. Number one, they have to be removed every year, removed and installed every year. Number two, they're extremely disruptive to the learning environment in itself. And they have to then be maintained every year. And that's not really my concern. My concern is more the fact that these schools were never built to have this kind of ventilation, this kind of air conditioning in the building. They don't have a proper vapor barrier. They're never designed to handle changes in temperature from inside a room and outside a room. So those are my comments. I don't know if Superintendent Armstrong has any other comments on it.
Thank you for that, Ms. Hinchliff. I guess, the only other things I can think of, certainly, particularly when it comes to donated equipment, we would be concerned about the quality of equipment and whether it met CSA standards. And certainly, there are Massey isn't the only school that may experience these sorts of issues. And, we're concerned obviously about equity in the sense of making sure that, all schools do have, the air conditioning available to them. And so, I would refer, as Ms. Hinchliffe said, to refer back to the board's policies on these items.
Thank you. I'll continue on down the list of questions from other trustees. Trustee Burgess, you have a second question, but Trustee Higginson has her first. So I'm going to go to Trustee Higginson first, then I can go to Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. This is kind of piggybacking a little bit on Trustee Halberstadt's question. I'm just wondering if we have any. I know we've seen a lot in the media recently about the impact of ventilation on COVID transmission, and I'm wondering if we have any indication from the health unit now that we kind of know we're entering into the winter or the summer months and the hotter weather. We are masked, and there are additional PPE protocols for our staff as well, with goggles and shields as well. And we have some of our youngest learners wearing masks. I'm wondering if there's any indication from them about the thresholds of temperatures that we're going to be experiencing now that we have these additional health supports in place, in addition to those hotter weathers, whether there's any indication from them that they may add to our plan a new threshold or some new information owing to the fact that we're wearing more PPE in our classrooms. If there's been any indication from public health.
I am not an expert with our Board of Health, so I would look to Superintendent Pike to assist me with that question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. Turn my camera on. Okay. We consult the Board of Health almost on a weekly basis on all variety of different topics. This one has not been brought forward in terms of hot weather and if there's any appetite to change PPE or what it looks like. Right now, the PPE is what the PPE is, and it's keeping our staff safe. So when there is a high risk exposure, and they do get interviewed in case of contact, typically because they are wearing what they're wearing, they're considered to be on regular basis, they consider to be a low risk. I don't see them changing their stance when it comes to PPE. The strategies that we've always suggested to our school staff is about what you're wearing, light colors, lots of drinking, all those kinds of things will continue to press upon our staff to continue to drink and to continue to wear light colors and to low exercise and all those kinds of things. It's a memo that we typically put out just to remind everybody about what we should be doing in the hot weather.
So just supplemental to that, if I could, Trustee Sipcar. Thank you. So I'm just wondering again if there's been any indication in your kind of talks with with public health whether the wearing of PPE, I'm in favor of them continuing on with that as you are, whether that kind of indicates anything as far as thresholds of weather permitting for us to dismiss a class or any of those things. If there's been any talk of what PPE for a safety standpoint does to that particular piece of safety.
And through the chair, certainly I can bring that up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to Trustee Burgess, and then I'll go after to Trustee Halberstadt.
Is it Trustee Halberstadt second?
That's his second question as well, so
okay.
You can go first.
Okay, I don't want to jump the queue. Okay, if I could, Madam Chair, through you, ask Ms. Hinchliffe, if we've ever, have we ever employed like heat exchangers? I'm thinking when you said, the protocol is at what, 2 degrees Celsius, I think you said, or something. And, and that's when it gets too cold, that when the incoming air, might have too much of a shock to the heating element or whatever it hits the equipment. do we ever, in our constructions, in our renovation, in our upgrades, in anything, employ heat exchange, for cooling and heating? I always think of the tunnels at Suzuki and whatever, but can we have that intake come through the ground and up, pull it up? Can we put it somewhere that it's pre-cooled or preheated so that the exchange is kind of mitigated on intake?
Actually, we are required to do that by building code at this point in time. We've been required to do that since 1990.
Good.
If you look at Dougal Public School, they actually have one of the first heat exchangers at the board, where the exhaust leaves the school, and through a piped heat exchanger actually preconditions the fresh air coming in. And
Right.
Actually, I believe Dougal, now that I think of it, is 100% outdoor air that comes in. So every school since then, we look for opportunities to have a heat exchanger, as you call it, type system. And so we have multiple examples of that in all our newer schools and any renovations we've done since 1990. And now the building code actually requires it.
Supplemental. So is it something that's just wickedly expensive to retrofit in some of these that have passive ventilation?
It's a little bit different. It's a little bit different because in a new school design, all the exhaust, the way they get the heat to recondition the air coming in is to take it out of the exhaust air. So in example, and I'll use Glenwood as a perfect example, they must have 20 exhaust fans. Mm-hmm. So all those exhaust fans have to be cordoned into one unit to change the air or energy to exchange the heat and then provide it to another system. It's like the air coming in kind of thing. Right. So it's not as simple sometimes in those effects. But what we've done, for example, at Campbell, they have individual unit ventilators, but when we retrofitted that school or redesigned that school, we actually put in a heat exchanger that conditions every supply air that's provided to each of those unit ventilators. So we look for those opportunities all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Trustee Halbersat now.
Yeah, Juliana, does all our schools equip with refilling water stations for hydration, which obviously is very important in these conditions?
Every school in our system has at least one. Many schools have much more than one. High schools have, and I believe every elementary school has at least one on every floor. Larger elementary schools have multiples. We look at all opportunities to, when we're doing renewal on water fountains, for example, we put in a bottle filling station as opposed to just a water fountain. High schools have been done for many years. And what we're trying to look at now is actually reducing some of the, because older high schools like Massey, for example, had many fountains like feet apart. And so now we're trying to consolidate them and put in bottle fill stations, which are much more user-friendly.
Okay.
He's muted.
I believe you're muted again, Alan.
What's that? I muted myself. Yeah, I know in the, it's a fairly controversial issue, ventilation, not just here, but across the province. Would you say, I guess to our administration or Juliana, have they has it caught the attention of the senior governments? I know we've asked for a lot of money if you go for ventilation, if you go through our agenda tonight and the minutes, you'll see several references to requests for additional money to help bolster our mitigation against extreme heat. So I guess that's the question. It looks like we're doing a lot that's caught the province's attention and the feds too, maybe senior governments. And there's money out there, and we're hoping to get some of it in our pockets so that we can go and do what we can to upgrade our systems with ventilation.
I'm going to allow Superintendent Armstrong to kind of filter that question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Trustee Halberstadt. I mean, the board continues to always look for opportunities for funding and opportunities to upgrade those systems. But currently I don't have any updates to provide you, but we'll continue to pursue all avenues with respect to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this ventilation update specifically? Okay, I actually do have one, but I'm gonna actually save it for item K1. It's because it's financial, and I think it'll be more appropriate at the financial expense report. So I will hold off till then and ask administration to present item G2, which is the COVID-19 update.
Thank you for that. I've got with me today Sean Mayhew, who's our manager of finance at the board, and I want to thank him because it's pretty late. So I do appreciate that he stuck with us tonight, and he's going to do the screen for me today. And I want to thank him too for his work, because it was his good work that produced the report that we've provided further on in the agenda, and he was very instrumental as well with the presentation. So next slide, please. So today we just wanted to provide a brief update from both an operations and a finance perspective in terms of COVID-19. From an operations update, we'll just chat very briefly about the PPE, as well as some updated health and safety protocols. And from a financial perspective, we wanted just to provide a recap with respect to the projected funding, an update on projected expenditures, and some additional considerations. Next slide, please. And next again. From a PPE perspective, I just wanted to clarify or just provide an update in terms of where we procure our PPE. Currently, we purchase it from two primary sources. The first one is the Ministry of Government and Consumer Services. And I'll refer to them as the MGCS throughout this presentation. And the MGCS sources, procures, and they distribute PPE and cleaning supplies on behalf of the Ministry of Education to all Ontario District School Boards. The MGCS is funded directly via the Ministry of Education. So PPE that is procured by the board through the MGCS does not have any financial impact to the board, in that we don't receive funding and we don't pay for the PPE that we obtain from the MGCS. Items that we typically procure from the MGCS include face shields, masks, safety glasses, safety goggles, isolation gowns, and gloves. In some instances, however, the board does need to procure items locally from our local suppliers. Some of the items that we would procure locally include our cleaning and disinfecting products, because we have established supplier agreements for those. Hand sanitizer and hand soap we do source locally. And there may be some items that aren't readily available through the MGCS that we would procure locally. So for example, we may need a certain size of an isolation gown for use in our schools, and we may need to look to a local supplier for that. As well, I just wanted to remind everyone that at the start of the school year, or pretty much, I guess, really at the end of last summer, in preparation for the school year, the board did procure a lot of its PPE through local suppliers. We did that because the distribution from the MGCS was a little bit unreliable at the beginning of the pandemic. or at the beginning of the school year. And certainly that has drastically improved. But we do actually have some inventory that is on our books from items that we bought ahead of the school year through local sources. The board also does procure PPE on behalf of the Transportation Consortium, and it does get billed out to the coterminous boards as well. And I wanted to highlight the work that our facility services staff does. All of our PPE is centrally ordered by the facility services staff on behalf of all of the sites at the board. They maintain that inventory, and they also internally distribute it to all 83 sites across the system. We do have a process that is automated through SparkRock so that budget holders or, for example, site supervisors such as school principals, vice principals, and secretaries can go into SparkRock and they can actually order the PPE that they require, and the facility services staff do assume the responsibilities for the internal warehousing and distribution of that. And I really want to thank the facility services staff for their tremendous work with respect to that, because it really is a big undertaking. Also not mentioned on this slide is Ms. Hinchliff and myself also participate in weekly calls with the MGCS and the Ministry of Education on PPE procurement. Next slide, please. On this slide, there's just an update in terms of the amount of PPE that we have distributed across the system since the beginning of the school year. And so you'll see that information on this slide. Next slide. And on this, again, this is a continuation of the PPE that is distributed. I just wanted to highlight that through the Ministry of Education, they have sourced cloth masks for distribution to students. Again, we get that through the MGCS, and you can see it's a significant number of cloth masks that have been available to our board and have been distributed to our schools. And so this is available to students, and based on the numbers of students that are actually participating for in-person learning, that's up to 4 to 5 cloth masks per student. So we do make sure that students do have the PPE if they forget to bring it when they come to school. Next slide, please. From a health and safety protocol, there have been a few changes that I'm sure you're already aware of, but we'll just briefly discuss them as it relates to student PPE changes. So as you are aware, all students that ride on board-provided transportation through the Transportation Consortium are required to wear a mask, and that was effective for January 1st of 2021. As well, based on the Ministry of Education, effective February 1st, 2021, all students in grades 1 to 12 are now required to wear a mask while they are attending school for in-person learning. Next slide. With respect to changes for staff PPE, all of our staff that are working in schools must wear both a mask and protective eye protection at all times. And this was based on a recommendation from the Windsor-Essex County Health Unit, and we implemented this effective March the 12th of 2021. And for eye protection, we provide face shields, safety goggles, and safety glasses. Some other initiatives that we are implementing as well is we have multiple safety plans across the board. For example, we'll have an elementary COVID safety plan, secondary school, administration building, and we're in the process now of updating and consolidating all of those safety plans into one document. Another initiative that we have planned is we will be deep cleaning all of our schools over the spring break next week. And in addition, we've replaced 3,000 bottles of Virex with Oxivir TB in our classrooms for daytime use. Next slide. And next slide. So I just wanted to provide you with a brief update from a financial perspective. The table on this slide represents a recap of the announced funding for COVID-19. There have been no publicly announced changes in funding to what was previously reviewed with trustees back on December the 8th of 2020. Just a brief reminder that the GSN funding, that's the first line on that table, It includes a small allocation for technology-related costs and mental health supports, and it also includes the GSN stabilization funding that was announced by the ministry to support boards for unplanned decreases in their student enrollment. The PPF funding, which is the second line on that table, that represents a broad range of various categories, including funding for additional custodians, health and safety training for occasional teachers, funding for additional teaching staff, remote learning, optimizing air quality, student transportation, enhanced cleaning, student mental health, and special education. And as well, you'll also note that on August the 11th of 2020, the board did approve a 1% allocation from our operating allocation of $3.2 million. And then on December the 8th, a further 1% was approved from use from our surplus, representing another allocation from our operating allocation, of $4.1 million as a contingency for COVID costs. Next slide, please. The next two slides provide a recap of the projected COVID-19 expenditures that were included in the board's revised estimate submission to the ministry in December, along with a revised projection as of today based on current expenditure patterns, actual experience, and updated information. And so you'll see on the column to the far right, there is the increases and decreases in the projections that we have now updated based on new information. As you'll notice, our teaching salary, staff, and salaries and benefits, we have an increase in there of $419,000. For our casual custodians, we have hired 80 full-time equivalent casual custodians. The initial projection assumed that we would have hired everybody on September 1st and would have been using them, but that didn't reflect the hiring pattern. And so the projection's been revised downward to be a little bit more representative of our actual expenditure patterns. You'll also notice there is a large increase associated with student technology devices. So these are devices that we have procured. The increase is related to devices specifically since our December 8th last update to you that the board did procure. And it represents approximately in total of the $4.2 million, it represents about 9,000 devices. As well, our projections, like I said, we've updated to look at the actual experience. We've looked at, damaged equipment that's been returned to the board that requires repair. And so you'll see that the technology repairs and replacement line, which is the last line on this table, has been updated to reflect that as well. Next slide, please. Again, we further updated these additional line items from a COVID expenditure projection perspective. The projection for PPE, we have increased that to reflect the actual cost of PPE that we did initially acquire through our local sources at the beginning of the school year, as I previously mentioned, along with anticipated expenditures for items that we may not be able to procure through the MGCS. As well, you'll notice we have a decrease we're projecting with respect to utilities. Initially, our thinking was that with running our ventilation systems longer, as Ms. Hinchliff mentioned in the ventilation update, that our utility costs would rise accordingly. But we're finding now that due to the milder winter and the delays in the global adjustment, that we can now manage the utility costs associated with running those systems longer within the original budget projection that was provided. And so we've adjusted that downward. Building reconfigurations. This is just an update to reflect the actual expenditures experienced and the spending pattern to date. And it basically represents the cost of the plexiglass barriers that were constructed in all of our sites, and a lot of the stickers and the wayfinding signage that's been placed throughout the system. And then you'll notice towards the bottom, the contingency, the additional 1%, and you'll see a large decrease. If you recall, back on December the 8th, The additional 1% was approved by the board, and we included that in our revised estimate submissions to the ministry as a contingency expense. It was not initially allocated to any specific expenditure line item, but we wanted to reflect the fact that the board did provide that contingency in the event that it was required. Based on our revised projections, we're not suggesting at this time that we will need to use that second additional 1%. And so that's why you see that decrease effectively in the last column. I just want to point out too, if you exclude the 1% contingency of the $4,168,891 that's in your revised estimate submission, that first column, the COVID expenditures that have been allocated to specific line items is $15,400,600. And if you compare that to the revised projection of $16,133,921, we're actually $733,000 higher than what we originally had indicated. Again, it's important to note that the state of the pandemic is very fluid, and that any changes in terms of the pandemic could have significant changes on these projections. Next slide, please. So again, just looking at everything all together, funding that's been announced is $12,105,041. When we add the 2%, remember we did it once in August and then again in December. When we add that 2%, our expenditures are, we are providing another $7.4 million, so that our total resources available for COVID spending is $19.6 million. Based on the previous slide, I've indicated that our COVID expenditures are $16.1 million that we are projecting and that we have updated, which shows that we have an excess of resources over expenditures of $3.4 million. Now, what is important to note is that we will have to utilize a portion, obviously, of our 2% operating allocation, because the ministry funding to date that we've received is $12 million, and our COVID expenditures are $16 million. So we are going to have to use 1% for sure, and a little bit more, just a little bit from the second 1%. So a total of 53% of that 2% allocation. Right now we're projecting we would need to utilize. Next slide, please. And just in terms of a quick commentary with respect to funding, certain funding allocations do provide a level of flexibility to cover the COVID-19 expenditures. So for example, the GSN stabilization grant and the PPF that we have for school reopening and emerging issues, that funding at this point, to our knowledge, is non-enveloped. So we do have flexibility in terms of what line items or expense items we apply that funding to. However, there are some COVID-19 expenditures that don't have any associated funding with it. For example, the technological devices for students, there's no funding for that. So that would be something, typically you would look at and say, well, we're going to need to use our 1% or our from our surplus to pay for that. And as I've mentioned, some of the funding allocations we've got, quite honestly, they're insufficient to cover the projected expenditures based on what we're seeing so far. So for example, the additional staffing funding we've gotten, for example, for custodial staff, for tech support, or for teaching, there's not enough funding allocated to that to cover our projected expenditures. So again, that's where we would go back and we would look at the non-envelope funding, such as the GSN stabilization grant, the school reopening or emerging issues grant, and then after that, we would have to apply it against our accumulated surplus in order to cover those costs. And as I've indicated, we will need to access a portion of that 2% based on the current funding that's been announced to date. Next slide, please. And then in terms of some other considerations, obviously absenteeism is something that we're always continuing to monitor. And finance does analyze absenteeism on a monthly basis. Currently, the costs associated with absenteeism can be managed within the existing budget, but circumstances associated with the pandemic certainly could impact this. So we do need to be mindful of that. As I've mentioned, the state of the pandemic, again, could have a significant influence on expenses depending on what happens in terms of keeping our schools open or closed for in-person learning. As we've heard through the presentations earlier in the Education Committee, staff fatigue and mental health are clearly a concern that we're focusing on, and could also relate back to staff absenteeism. So we're very mindful that that could have an impact on these projections. We continue to look for in-year budget savings and opportunities so that we can apply those to the to COVID-related costs. And in the finance report that's included in your package, there is some references in there to potential budget opportunities that have been identified. The supply chain, there are obviously implications related not just to any infrastructure projects that we may have going on, but also with respect to, in particular, acquisition of PPE. And obviously that makes a consideration, particularly if we can't procure something through the MGCS and we have to purchase it through a local source. That costs the board, obviously. Will there be further funding announcements? That certainly would have a significant implication as well to what we've presented to you tonight. And of course, I know it's received a lot of attention, and as it should, is the timing of vaccinations for our school staff. That obviously also has an impact potentially on absenteeism, and could have an implication as well to the projections. And so next slide. With that, myself and Mr. Mayhew would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive presentation for a COVID update for us. I look to my colleagues to see if there are any questions on this presentation. Okay, I see one coming in. Trustee Burgess, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. And it's I'm going to ask a question where I know a lot of administration fear to tread kind of thing, but it's a political question. You've noted several areas. I'm going to just say technological devices. I mean, the reality is we could not operate a school board with the level of virtual learning needed and not have the availability of devices. So to me, that's a blatant political question. I'm wondering, do you ever, through your professional organizations, I'm thinking of COSBO or, something like that, can you give us any hints for advocacy? We've put our, thoughts in for the Grants for Student Needs, the GSNs, but, before we know it, we're going to have some announcements, I would think, and we are going to be putting a budget together. Is there something that we need to really red flag? Because despite all our preparations and our goodwill and all the things that we've been very prudent on, et cetera, there's still going to be things that are blatant that we need additional funding on. Can you zero in on any of those that we need to be speaking to, through OPSPA, for example, or through COSBO or through any of the professional organizations?
Thank you for your question, through you, Madam Chair. Certainly the COSBO group does have representation. They represent there's certain representatives that do have frequent conversations with the ministry. This group also does advocate, similar to other organizations, with respect to budget consultation for the GSN. Items related to student technology has come up frequently. The needs for boards to utilize up to 2% of their operating allocations, that continually does come up as a conversation. The costs for running virtual schools That is also frequently brought up, and the group does have representation similar to the organizations that you are involved in, and does advocate and bring those issues forward to the ministry. So the voice is definitely there. We try to be as influential as we can, but certainly, the voice is very active from this group.
Is there a follow-up, Trustee Burgess?
No, that's great. Thank you. I just want to know that we're kind of aligned and that there's pressure, that's needed. So thank you very much for that answer.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, I do have one that I'll ask here instead of at the report stage. You made mention, and I know I picked this up in one of the, in the report, the interim financial expense report as well, that we have around 3,400,000, I'll just say 3.4 million, that was, I guess, pre-approved by our board, that dips into the 2% that we were allocated, that is currently not allocated anywhere. Some of the pockets of funding that we've gotten from the ministry have to go to specific COVID-related expenses, whereas our up to 2% was pretty unenveloped, although it was under the broad umbrella of COVID-related expenses. Do we have any sort of direction from the ministry of how that money can be spent, or is it just our own board's direction that specified COVID-related expenditures that money could be used for?
Thank you for the question through you. The direction from the ministry is you may use up to 2% of your operating allocation to cover COVID-related expenditures. It's broad from that perspective. I mean, obviously, we need to determine what is a COVID-related expenditure. So we've implemented a lot of measures in terms of our general ledger, making sure that we are tracking expenditures appropriately so that we are able to make sure that we're reporting accurately. But the direction from that perspective is broad.
Okay, so as a follow-up to that then, this piggybacks off of maybe some of the last presentations questions around the ventilation and the concerns around there. I know we are waiting on potential funding from the ministry on a couple issues related to ventilation and upgrades there. I'm just wondering if any sort of air conditioning units can be considered a COVID expense. If we think about some of our schools where we know that are going to be hot this year, and we've talked about, whether, people can donate or whether there's, how we consider issues of equity. And I just wonder if with the additional masking, with the lack of fans, and we know that this money is set aside and hasn't really been allocated anywhere, and we've pre-approved it. And we also saved money from our last year's budget and increased our surplus from 2019, 2020. Is that something that we can consider as we enter into the warmer months? It was 24 degrees out today already, and I know that we're not going to be able to solve all problems, but I'm just wondering, can that money be directed since COVID has impacted the way that we cool our schools currently?
Thank you for the question. I think in part what Ms. Hinchliffe had indicated, sometimes it's not easy just to simply put an air conditioner or air conditioning in a school based on how the building envelope and how it was designed and constructed. Also, the funding that we receive from the ministry with respect to using the funding we've received, or our 2% operating allocation, is intended for operating expenses, and air conditioning would be considered a capital related expenditure, which would likely be precluded in terms of utilizing that 2% allocation for something along those lines.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions on this one then? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to item H, which are delegations. And then we will go to item I, the speakers list. And I believe we had one person who is on the speakers list. It is 10:24, and I appreciate their patience in waiting to be on. And I look to Tammy to see if they have actually been able to call in at this point. Hello? Brianne, are you there?
Participant is now joining.
Okay,
here. Can you hear me?
Brianne, yes, I will give you the floor. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, thank you, Chairperson Sipkar. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, trustees, and Greater Essex County District School Board Administration. I first wanted to share our gratitude to you and to the rest of the trustees for the advocacy made in order to keep our Greater Essex County District School Board families, staff, communities safe, as well as the pivot in approach to providing open and transparent communication. Also, I wanted to share a thanks to our Greater Essex County District School Board admin for their resiliency and care during the pandemic to uphold the board's mission to provide excellence in public education. As many Greater Essex County District School Board school facilities have not been retrofitted with air handling or chiller units, and perhaps have limited or non-functioning windows, I'm confident that the concerns and queries will mount regarding how both staff and students can be equipped with safe and appropriate cooling methods to promote a learning environment that's consistent with the board's mission. Through your leadership and with the partnership of our valued board administration, I was hopeful that a virtual communication could be drafted to our families and our staff to address the efforts that the board has taken to address ventilation matters ahead of the change of season. This communication, I would suggest, should include an assessment per school, as Trustee Hinchcliffe, Superintendent Hinchcliffe had mentioned, to advise on how the schools individually are equipped, whether that is through chiller air, window ventilation, etc., and the steps that can be taken to ensure comfort and to maintain a safe classroom environment, including hygienic practices for masking, shield wearing during hotter temperatures, the need for more frequent hydration where bottle refilling stations may be limited or closed for the drinking fountains to ensure equity amongst all students that may not have access to water bottles that they can refill. Classrooms that do not have appropriate ventilation or airflow, outdoor opportunities where shaded areas are not available for all students at the same time, the current closure of common areas where cooling areas have been previously established, or the use of in-class cooling devices. Now, I know that we had raised this concern back as far as March 14th, and we're incredibly thankful to both our trustees for bringing this to administration, as well as to administration for preparing such a comprehensive presentation regarding ventilation tonight. We really feel that a targeted communication to our school communities will serve as maybe an infographic reminder as to how they can keep safe during these very difficult times, how they can remain cool, and what they can do to practice those sanitary practices. Because as children and staff, as the temperatures rise within the classrooms, there may be an increased frequent need for mask changing, for increased hydration, and really that infographic will serve as a reminder as to how we can all stay safe together. Also, with further ministry advocacy for funding and Greater Essex County District School Board capital funding prioritization, also that could be made to upgrade these pandemic-minded cooling solutions. I also wanted to make mention, after hearing all of the valued input, that we're not alone in this matter. We know that there's aging infrastructure or infrastructure that has not been retrofitted with air conditioning units. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that the Toronto Catholic District School Board, as recently as 2019, they published a feasibility study for air conditioning upgrade to an older facility in which wall-mounted multi-split units were utilized. I have an intimate knowledge of air conditioning and refrigeration systems, and this is an opportunity in older infrastructures to be able to provide that support that has minimal invasion really to the existing structure, and also it can incorporate a cooling mechanism in which, as Superintendent Hinchcliffe had mentioned, wouldn't cause the mold or any type of health-related matters for where the cold air meets the hot air and all of the different variables that can can occur accordingly. So I really appreciate your time and attention to this query and to this recommendation through you, Madam Chair, to the Board of Trustees, just so that we can make sure that our communities are aware of the opportunities to really keep cool and comfortable, so that they can all have equitable learning across all the Greater Essex County District School Board schools. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much, Brianne. You were right on time with your delegation. You must have timed it perfectly. Thank you so much for your words. I heard a couple of themes, and although we can't ask questions directly of administration, trustees can ask questions of our delegate or our speaker tonight. So I'm just wondering if there are any questions from trustees right now.
I have a question.
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, maybe to Brianne, it sounds like you want to see a comprehensive report or communication devised by our administration or by the school board trustees to go out to the schools and I guess the principals, etc., before the hot weather hits. Would that be accurate? And if so, I'm assuming you're going to pass this your presentation along to our secretary, our executive secretary, and then perhaps the school board. The board can look at ways of hopefully improving communication to the community as the hot weather bears down on us.
Thank you, Trustee Halberstadt, for that question. I really feel that that Superintendent Hinchcliffe and Superintendent Armstrong had done a fantastic job in providing that comprehensive overview of the different systems that are in schools presently. What I was hoping was that the board could publish a communication that would be a little bit more specific to individual schools, to say that this is your current operating system within your school, and these are the different recommended methods in which students and staff can have access to cooling comfort within kind of an environment that may only have recycled or air ventilation type services. And yes, I will pass this over to Madame Leboeuf.
Thank you for that, Alan. Or sorry, Trustee Halberstadt. Was there a follow-up to that, or no?
Just suggesting that we can maybe take a look at it and put our heads together, maybe come up with some kind of a communication strategy for the hot weather.
Sure. Yep, I will go to Trustee Burgess now.
Well, Madam Chair, it's a question of clarification, but I'm not sure the speaker can answer it, but I'm going to ask it of you, because what's happening in my thought process right now is that we revised a policy last year, I believe, inclement weather and air conditioning policy, and there was a piece in there specifically about getting ahead of the season regarding information to the community, to parents and the greater community. I thought that was part of either the regulation or an administrative procedure, something, but I thought we sort of took care of that because we flagged it as a valuable communication piece before whatever season, hot and cold. Can you clarify whether I'm thinking right?
Yes. Yeah, I was going to ask this question of administration during trustee question periods. So I was going to wait until then to ask about our policy that we just updated. I would agree with the speaker about a communication necessary. So I was going to ask the question at that time, if that's all right, Trustee Burgess.
Perfect. Thank you. I was just seeking clarification. Thank you.
Any further questions of our speaker tonight? Okay, seeing none, Thank you so much for joining us at such a late hour, and I appreciate your advocacy on this issue. And hopefully we can have a bit of more of a conversation with administration in a few minutes that you can stick around for or listen to on YouTube on our live stream. Okay, so with that, I will continue on our agenda tonight to item J, new business. There's none. And we'll go on to items K, which are reports. Both are as part of our agenda package to be received. I do not believe administration was going to present on them formally, but they will take any questions for items K1 or K2. So do we have any questions from trustees? Okay, Trustee Higginson, I see you in the chat. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you to administration. And it was I'm actually piggybacking a little bit on some of the things that we just had in our COVID-19 update and ventilation update, and this is in reference to page 8 of this of our package, but page 3 of 13 of the
Unknown
report.
Participant is now exiting.
Good night, Brianne. In the proceeds of disposition, so I know we just had that quick conversation about being able to use the a bit of the additional 1% of our reserves for COVID-related expenses, but they couldn't be used for capital expenses. Could these proceeds of disposition that are available now to be used for COVID-related expenses, can they be used for capital investments? Can these proceeds of disposition specifically, in their ability to allow us now to use them for COVID-related expenses, could those be used for capital?
I'll look to administration on that one.
Through you, Madam Chair, I can attempt to answer this one. So the 1% of the proceeds of disposition, you're right, can be used to cover off incremental COVID expenditures. However, the underlying concept of the use for proceeds of disposition is that they're used for renewal, school renewal costs. I'm not sure, for example, air conditioners would meet the definition of a school renewal capital cost.
I think too that when you take 15% of those proceeds of disposition, I know every little bit counts, but it's not a really large number.
Certainly, just to what's the word I'm looking for? Supplemental to that. Supplemental. That's the word I'm looking for. 10:30 p.m. So and that's, I guess, was my. I think you may have answered the question, but just for clarification, so that's what proceeds of disposition have been used for in the past is school renewal. And what they're saying is that we can use them for school renewal. Is that the direction of the ministry for allowing us to use these proceeds of disposition for school renewal projects that are COVID related expenses? Is that the kind of direction that we've been given, or is there some leeway, or do we need to ask a question whether there's leeway that we can use these on less renewal, more capital upgrade?
Superintendent Armstrong, I think we would have to follow up specifically with the ministry regarding that. And I know that perhaps Ms. Hinchliffe might be able to elaborate a little bit. We do have, the ministry does do a condition assessment on all of our school sites. And so there are a lot of renewal needs across the system, things that are more high and urgent, which is not to say someone's thermal comfort isn't important. But, you know, when we're talking about window replacement and leaking masonry and roof repairs, sometimes those items do tend to take a little bit more of a priority. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I thank you, and I can appreciate that, because I mean we're looking right now at all these unmet needs that we have that are exacerbated by COVID, but still existed before COVID and continue to exist, and they're chronically underfunded in that sort of way. So I can appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions on item K1 or K2? Okay, go ahead, Trustee Higginson.
Sorry, thank you. I did have another on K1, and this is on page 4 under supports for student needs funds and investment of system priorities. I know that the ministry has said that the PPF funds will continue, but I haven't heard about these specifically. So I know that the SSF fund and the ISP fund did fund 42 positions. Is there any indication from the ministry yet if those one-time funds will be re-upped again this year with the GSN? So do we have any indication that this funding will continue?
But I'll ask Mr. Mayhew if he could answer that, please.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. I believe the initial the investment aligned with the collective agreements, and I think they were for a 2-year period. That said, I don't believe we don't have any releases yet as to what the GSN will look like for next year. So I can't comment specifically on that, but I do believe they were for a 2-year period minimum. And I can double check that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Anything else on that, Trustee Higgison?
Nope, that was it. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions on K1 or K2? Okay, I do have a quick question then on that, as always. On K1 there, and I know I touched on this during the presentation. I just wanted to ask it again and also ask and maybe kind of comment on it actually. If we do have extra monies that we've set aside, both either from the proceeds of disposition, which is going to be my question, or from the 2% that we've set aside, is administration needing direction from trustees about spending that? I guess the reason I ask is because if we do have some expenses that from the both operations or capital side of things that can be that we can make a dent in this year, because we aren't getting specific ministry funded, and they are being exacerbated by COVID, which I think we could make a case for. I'm just wondering if administration needs direction from trustees, specifically if there was any desire to use that money. And I appreciate Superintendent Armstrong's comment about there's other priorities that have been ongoing, and that we may not that we may want to consider in addition to that. And so I'm just wondering, I'm just wondering what kind of direction does administration need? Because I would hate for 3.4 million that we've set aside for COVID related expenses, and we have some maybe indirect COVID related expenses that are expenses that are exacerbated by COVID and that we're hearing from the community on. I'm just wondering, I would hate to see that money go back into our surplus when we have an opportunity to invest in our schools. And so I'm just wondering if administration can comment on what that looks like in terms of direction there as well.
Thank you for the question. I really haven't had an opportunity to really think about what you've just suggested, hearing the question right now. We do get a lot of funding, a fair amount of funding from the ministry for school renewal and school condition improvement. And so as we've indicated, we do prioritize that funding for the high priority and high urgent needs in the school. The ministry's been clear about the 2%, being able to utilize 2% is for direct COVID related costs. So I'm not sure, when you're referring to projects that are indirectly related to COVID, if you're talking ventilation, if you're talking air conditioning, I'm not clear. I think it might be difficult to make that connection with the ministry. And I think it's also important, and nobody likes to hear it, but it's the accountant in me, so I can't help but say it. But I think it is important to be cautious in terms of how we're utilizing our surplus. Just because we have the 2% available to us for direct COVID-related costs, where we can manage that without needing to use that full 2%, I think it's important because we never know down the road if there may be an unexpected and unplanned issue that needs to be addressed and has to be paid for through funding or through sources that are outside of funding that we receive from the ministry. And that's where, we've worked really hard as a board to accumulate that surplus for situations such as that.
Madam Chair, if I can just add to Superintendent Armstrong's answer there. One of the processes we're going through right now too is the 21-22 budget. And we're also using keep in mind, we're depleting our surplus by the 1%. So that's bringing us down quite a bit already. And I mean, we don't know what's ahead of us. We received kind of the windfall of the GSN stabilization money, which we're getting indication that might not continue next year, and that boards are going to have to fund a virtual style of learning if that continues. And as we all know, that takes additional resources, teachers, and costs a lot of money. So we just have to be mindful that any money we can kind of save and put towards that next year, should we need to really dip into a full 2%, it's important to consider those things.
It's Director Kelly, if I could add to that as well. And certainly the ministry direction has been very clear that we are to be conservative in our planning for next year. And so to support Mr. Mayo's comment there, I think we really do need to consider all that, because we have so many unanticipated or unpredictable kind of considerations for next year, but we have been directed to be very conservative.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or on these reports? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on to trustee question period, item L. Any questions from trustees?
Yes, Madam Chair,
Sure.
I have one down below.
Sure, and I'm just mindful, we are way past timed items. I don't know, in the original meeting, I don't know if that matters at all. I'm just going to keep going through our agenda. I think we're almost through it. Trustee Burgess and Trustee Halperstat. So Trustee Halperstat, I'll go to you first, then Trustee Burgess after.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope you beg an indulgence and I'd like to merge the notice of motion with an announcement. I think I spoke to you earlier in the day.
We're in trustee question period, Trustee Halperstat. We're in question period.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have a question, or are you making a notice of motion?
I'm sorry, I have a notice of motion, yeah.
Okay, that's the next item. So I'll hold off for just 1 minute. I'll go to you, Trustee Burgess.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is a question about traffic calming at Gosfield North Public School. I'm in receipt of a piece of correspondence, an administrative report from the Office of the Director of Infrastructure Services from the County of Essex. I'll forward that, but it's concerning traffic calming at Gosfield North. There's been, I think, some congestion, some speeding, some concerns around the use of the kiss and ride. The increased amount of parents who are dropping their kids off and avoiding bus transportation, et cetera, has created a different situation at Gosfield North. I'm wondering if anybody can comment on it. Are they in receipt of that? Has there been any discussion about some of the concerns about County Road 27 adjacent to Gosfield North School?
Through you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. I haven't heard anything specifically about this. So if you would be, if you could share that information with me, I'd be more than happy to follow up.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm seeing Trustee Cheen.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Oh, my question is still regarding the air conditioner, and I understand that the senior administration said that the building was built many years ago, which is not suitable for air conditioner. But currently we can see the many houses are built many years ago, and almost all houses has air conditioner on. So I don't think this is a is an excuse to prohibit, the installation of air conditioning. So, and also the previously, we all mentioned the cost of setting up the air conditioner, but it's easy to say that we refuse donations and to make us safer, but I still hope that that as senior administration we can be more active to try to solve the problems rather than just stay behind the comfort zone. And also the donation does not always mean the equipments, and they may donate the money, the funding that we may help the air conditioner. If we cannot do all the buildings together, we may do one by one. That's better than doing nothing. I see that from these years, I see there is kind of not enough actions taken on improving those conditions. So I would rather to make a little bit push on doing that. I hope you understand. Thank you.
Hi, Trustee Chin. Was there a question there, or is that just a comment? Just to clarify your question directly.
It doesn't matter. They can answer it or not, but that's my hope. I hope they can do something rather than just stay behind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if administration wants to comment, but I didn't hear a question there. Okay, so I'll continue on then. Are there any other questions from trustees? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to item M, notices of motion. Trustee Halberstadt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would just beg your indulgence that I could maybe combine the notice of motion with an announcement, sort of a preamble into the notice of motion.
Oh, it's that.
Okay, on February 6th, you might remember that our board declined an offer from the Workers' Health and Safety Center and the OSSTF to present a PowerPoint presentation on the risks involved in using and overusing the cleaning and disinfectant product Virex 256 in our schools and facilities across the system. In debating the merits of welcoming a virtual 30-minute report from WHSC's Director of Information Services, Loretta Michaud, it was suggested that WHSC be asked to forward the PowerPoint to the board without presenting in person and engaging in a question and answer session. As the mover of the original motion, I agreed to ask Loretta to forward a PowerPoint. She has complied, and I believe the trustees have seen it on our website, entitled Effective and Safer Cleaning and Disinfecting to Help Prevent COVID-19 Transmission. The center's researchers, including occupational hygienist James Miyochi and Todd Irick, conclude on page 7 of their report that there are several products on the market deemed effective by Health Canada for deactivating COVID, while at the same time marketing an effective for sanitizing food prep services and extending and hard services. On page 43, 44, and I won't be much longer, it states that the case for safer alternatives underscores the precautionary principle, which essentially requires employers under the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the safety of workers. On page 55, 53 to 56, the study identifies 4 types comprising of a dozen alternatives, two alcohol-based, 3 citric acid-based, 3 hydrogen peroxide, and 3 thymol-based cleansers. So my notice of motion, Your Worship, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, is that, just a second here, got to find it. At the May 4th Ops and Finance Standing Committee, that the board direct administration to consider the alternatives to Virex as GCDSB's cleaning products for hard surfaces and food preparation as identified by the Workers' Health and Safety Center's report, and forward and for also to let on April 6th and for trustees and administration as well, that administration examine the cost of using one or more of these alternative products. Sorry, I stumbled there. I'm getting a little tired.
That's okay, Trustee Halverset. Thank you for that. And I'll just ask that you submit it to, I guess it would be Ms. Meloche for this committee specifically for our next committee meeting. Any further notices of motion, or I guess, yeah, we're still on notices of motion. Nope. Okay, seeing none. Any announcements? And I actually don't have any tonight. I might have some at the next meeting, but not for tonight. And seeing that there's no more announcements for any of the trustees, we are adjourned and we'll reconvene into the public board meeting. So I'll turn it over to Chair Higginson.
Thank you very much. And yes, I do apologize for not noticing that we had well passed notices of motion on our timed agenda, but I appreciate everyone pushing through for that. So we are at of our blue agenda, E, declarations of conflict of interest for our public session here this evening. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? Seeing none, moving on to F, actions of the board meeting private session. I don't believe we had any of those. So we're on to G, approval of the minutes. Looking for a mover to approve the minutes of our February 2nd, moved by Trustee Hatfield. Do we have a seconder for the minutes of February 2nd? Seconded. Do I see any opposition to the approval of those minutes? February 2nd.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Indeed.
We did have an action by consent arising from private session.
Indeed, we did. Thank you for clarifying that.
And I think it does have to be ratified because it was done in committee.
Trustee Cook, do you want to take that?
It caught me off guard.
Caught me off guard.
Yeah.
I would move that, Madam Chair.
Okay. I don't have the item number.
It would be item G1.
Okay.
It was a motion in item G1.
Okay. So Trustee Burgess is going to move it. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Trustee or Chair Higginson. All in favor?
Support.
Any opposed? It passes.
Thank you very much, Trustee Cook, and thank you for that point of order, Trustee Burgess, keeping that, making sure that we ratify that in public. I appreciate that. So, looking for any opposition to the minutes, to passing the minutes of February 2nd. Seeing none, I will move on to business arising from those minutes, which are included in our package. Any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, do we have any recommendations from our standing committees this evening? I don't believe we had any recommendations out of those. I'm going to give myself a few minutes to be proven incorrect, as I was just a minute ago. Seeing none, thank you very much. For moving on to notices of motion. Do we have any notices of motion for public session? Give us a few more minutes here. Any notices of motion, rouse anybody from their sleep. I will pass through that one, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your patience and work this evening. And thank you to all of our guests who joined us and were patient with us as well. I appreciate your work. Thank you very much.